France, officially the French Republic, is a country whose territory consists of metropolitan France in Western Europe and several overseas regions and territories. The metropolitan area of France extends from the Mediterranean Sea to the English Channel and the North Sea, and from the Rhine to the Atlantic Ocean. It is bordered by Belgium, Luxembourg and Germany to the northeast, Switzerland and Italy to the east, and Andorra and Spain to the south. The overseas territories include French Guiana in South America and several islands in the Atlantic, Pacific and Indian Oceans. The country's 18 integral regions, 5 of which are situated overseas, span a combined area of and a total population of 67.02 million. France is a unitary semi-presidential republic with its capital in Paris, the country's largest city and main cultural and commercial center. Other major urban areas include Lyon, Marseille, Toulouse, Bordeaux, Lille and Nice. France, including its overseas territories, has the most number of time zones with total 12 time zones. During the Iron Age, what is now metropolitan France was inhabited by the Gauls, a Celtic people. Rome annexed the area in 51 BC, holding it until the arrival of Germanic Franks in 476. Who formed the Kingdom of Francia. The Treaty of Verdun of 843 partitioned Francia into East Francia, Middle Francia and West Francia. West Francia, which became the Kingdom of France in 987, emerged as a major European power in the late Middle Ages, following its victory in the Hundred Years' War 1337 to 1453. During the Renaissance, French culture flourished and a global colonial empire was established, which by the 20th century would become the second largest in the world. The 16th century was dominated by religious civil wars between Catholics and Protestants Huguenots. France became Europe's dominant cultural, political, and military power in the 17th century under Louis XIV. In the late 18th century, the French Revolution overthrew the absolute monarchy, establishing one of modern history's earliest republics and drafting the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, which expresses the nation's ideals to this day. In the 19th century, Napoleon took power and established the First French Empire. His subsequent Napoleonic Wars 1803–15 shaped the course of continental Europe. Following the collapse of the empire, France endured a tumultuous succession of governments culminating with the establishment of the French Third Republic in 1870. France was a major participant in World War I, from which it emerged victorious, and was one of the Allies in World War II, but came under occupation by the Axis powers in 1940. Following liberation in 1944, a Fourth Republic was established and later dissolved in the course of the Algerian War. The Fifth Republic, led by Charles de Gaulle, was formed in 1958 and remains today. Algeria and nearly all the other colonies became independent in the 1960s, with most retaining close economic and military connections with France. France has long been a global center of art, science, and philosophy. It hosts the world's fourth largest number of UNESCO World Heritage Sites and is the leading tourist destination, receiving around 83 million foreign visitors annually. France is a developed country with the world's sixth largest economy by nominal GDP, and 10th largest by purchasing power parity. In terms of aggregate household wealth, it ranks fourth in the world. France performs well in international rankings of education, healthcare, life expectancy, and human development. France is considered a great power in global affairs, being one of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council with the power to veto and an official nuclear weapon state. It is a leading member state of the European Union and the Eurozone. Modern France is still named today in Italian and Spanish, while in German, in Dutch and in Swedish all mean land, realm of the Franks. There are various theories as to the origin of the name Frank. Following the precedents of Edward Gibbon and Jacob Grimm, the name of the Franks has been linked with the word franc free in English. It has been suggested that the meaning of free was adopted because, after the conquest of Gaul, only Franks were free of taxation. Another theory is that it is derived from the Proto-Germanic word, which translates as javelin or lance, as the throwing axe of the Franks was known as a francisca. However, it has been determined that these weapons were named because of their use by the Franks, not the other way around. In English, France is pronounced in American English and or in British English. The pronunciation with is mostly confined to accents with the trap bath split such as received pronunciation, though it can be also heard in some other dialects such as Cardiff English, in which is in free variation with
history. Prehistory before the 6th century BC.
The oldest traces of human life in what is now France date from approximately 1.8 million years ago. Over the ensuing millennia, humans were confronted by a harsh and variable climate, marked by several glacial eras. Early hominids led a nomadic hunter-gatherer life. France has numerous megalithic sites from the Neolithic period, including the exceptionally dense Karnak stones site approximately 3300 BC.
Antiquity 6th century 5th century AD.
In 600 BC, Ionian Greeks, originating from Phaeacia, founded the colony of Massalia, present-day Marseille, on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. This makes it France's oldest city. At the same time, some Gallic Celtic tribes penetrated parts of the current territory of France, and this occupation spread to the rest of France between the 5th and 3rd century BC. The concept of Gaul emerged at that time. It corresponds to the territories of Celtic settlement ranging between the Rhine, the Atlantic Ocean, the Pyrenees and the Mediterranean. The borders of modern France are roughly the same as those of ancient Gaul, which was inhabited by Celtic Gauls. Gaul was then a prosperous country, of which the southernmost part was heavily subject to Greek and Roman cultural and economic influences. Around 390 BC, the Gallic chieftain Brennus and his troops made their way to Italy through the Alps, defeated the Romans in the Battle of the Ilia, and besieged and ransomed Rome. The Gallic invasion left Rome weakened, and the Gauls continued to harass the region until 345 BC, when they entered into a formal peace treaty with Rome. But the Romans and the Gauls would remain adversaries for the next centuries, and the Gauls would continue to be a threat in Italy. Around 125 BC, the south of Gaul was conquered by the Romans, who called this region Provincia Nostra, province, which over time evolved into the name Provence in French. Julius Caesar conquered the remainder of Gaul and overcame a revolt carried out by the Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix in 52 BC. According to Plutarch and the writings of scholar Brendan Woods, the Gallic Wars resulted in 800 conquered cities, 300 subdued tribes, 1 million men sold into slavery, and another 3 million dead in battle. Gaul was divided by Augustus into Roman provinces. Many cities were founded during the Gallo-Roman period, including Lugdunum, present-day Lyon, which is considered the capital of the Gauls. Nevertheless, the situation improved in the first half of the 4th century, which was a period of revival and prosperity for Roman Gaul. In 312, Emperor Constantine I converted to Christianity. Subsequently, Christians, who had been persecuted until then, increased rapidly across the entire Roman Empire. But, from the beginning of the 5th century, the barbarian invasions resumed. Teutonic tribes invaded the region from present-day Germany, the Visigoths settling in the southwest, the Burgundians along the Rhine River Valley, and the Franks from whom the French take their name in the north.
Early Middle Ages 5th to the 10th century.
At the end of the antiquity period, ancient Gaul was divided into several Germanic kingdoms and a remaining Gallo-Roman territory, known as the Kingdom of Segrius. Simultaneously, Celtic Britons, fleeing the Anglo-Saxon settlement of Britain, settled the western part of Armorica. As a result, the Armorican Peninsula was renamed Brittany. Celtic culture was revived and independent petty kingdoms arose in this region. The first leader to make himself king of all the Franks was Clovis I, who began his reign in 481, routing the last forces of the Roman governors of the province in 486. Clovis claimed that he would be baptized a Christian in the event of his victory against the Visigoths, which was said to have guaranteed the battle. Clovis regained the southwest from the Visigoths, was baptized in 508, and made himself master of what is now Western Germany. Clovis I was the first Germanic conqueror after the fall of the Roman Empire to convert to Catholic Christianity, rather than Arianism. Thus France was given the title eldest daughter of the Church by the papacy, and French kings would be called the most Christian kings of France. The Franks embraced the Christian Gallo-Roman culture, and ancient Gaul was eventually renamed Francia, land of the Franks. The Germanic Franks adopted Romanic languages, except in northern Gaul where Roman settlements were less dense and where Germanic languages emerged. Clovis made Paris his capital and established the Merovingian dynasty, but his kingdom would not survive his death. The Franks treated land purely as a private possession and divided it among their heirs, so 4 kingdoms emerged from Clovis: Paris, Orleans, Soissons, and Reims. The last Merovingian kings lost power to their mayors of the palace, head of household. One mayor of the palace, Charles Martel, defeated an Islamic invasion of Gaul at the Battle of Tours 732 and earned respect and power within the Frankish kingdoms. His son, Pepin the Short, seized the crown of Francia from the weakened Merovingians and founded the Carolingian dynasty. Pepin's son, Charlemagne, reunited the Frankish kingdoms and built a vast empire across Western and Central Europe. Proclaimed Holy Roman Emperor by Pope Leo III and thus establishing in earnest the French government's long-time historical association with the Catholic Church, Charlemagne tried to revive the Western Roman Empire and its cultural grandeur. Charlemagne's son, Louis I Emperor 814 to 840, kept the empire united. However, this Carolingian empire would not survive his death. In 843, under the Treaty of Verdun, the empire was divided between Louis' 3 sons, with East Francia going to Louis the German, Middle Francia to Lothair I, and West Francia to Charles the Bald. West Francia approximated the area occupied by, and was the precursor to, modern France. During the 9th and 10th centuries, continually threatened by Viking invasions, France became a very decentralized state. The nobility's titles and lands became hereditary, and the authority of the king became more religious than secular and thus was less effective and constantly challenged by powerful noblemen. Thus was established feudalism in France. Over time, some of the king's vassals would grow so powerful that they often posed a threat to the king. For example, after the Battle of Hastings in 1066, William the Conqueror added King of England to his titles, becoming both the vassal to as Duke of Normandy and the equal of as King of England the King of France, creating recurring tensions.
Late Middle Ages 10th to the 15th century.
The Carolingian dynasty ruled France until 987, when Hugh Capet, Duke of France and Count of Paris, was crowned King of the Franks. His descendants the Capetians, the House of Valois, and the House of Bon progressively unified the country through wars and dynastic inheritance into the Kingdom of France. which was fully declared in 1190 by Philip II Augustus. The French nobility played a prominent role in most crusades to restore Christian access to the Holy Land. French knights made up the bulk of the steady flow of reinforcements throughout the 200-year span of the Crusades, in such a fashion that the Arabs uniformly referred to the Crusaders as French, caring little whether they really came from France. The French Crusaders also imported the French language into the Levant, making French the base of the lingua franca lit Frankish language of the Crusader states. Later kings expanded their domain to cover over half of modern continental France, including most of the north, centre and west of France. Meanwhile, the royal authority became more and more assertive, centered on a hierarchically conceived society distinguishing nobility, clergy, and commoners. From the 11th century, the House of Plantagenet, the rulers of the county of Anjou, succeeded in establishing its dominion over the surrounding provinces of Maine and Touraine, then progressively built an empire that spanned from England to the Pyrenees and covering half of modern France. Tensions between the Kingdom of France and the Plantagenet Empire would last 100 years, until Philip Augustus of France conquered between 1202 and 1214 most of the continental possessions of the empire, leaving England and Aquitaine to the Plantagenets. Following the Battle of Bouvines, the Angevin court retreated to England, but persistent Capetian-Plantagenet rivalry would pave the way for another conflict. Charles IV the Fair died without an heir in 1328. Under the rules of the Salic law, the crown of France could not pass to a woman, nor could the line of kingship pass through the female line. England and France went to war in what would become known as the 100 Years' War. The exact boundaries changed greatly with time, but French landholdings of the English kings remained extensive for decades. With charismatic leaders, such as Joan of Arc and La Hire, strong French counterattacks won back English continental territories. Like the rest of Europe, France was struck by the Black Death. Half of the 17 million population of France died.
Early modern period 15th century 1789.
Main articles, French Renaissance, c. 1400 c. 1650, Early Modern France 1500 to 1789, French Wars of Religion 1562 to 1598 and Ancient Regime c. 1400 to 1792. The French Renaissance saw a spectacular cultural development and the first standardization of the French language, which would become the official language of France and the language of Europe's aristocracy. It also saw a long set of wars, known as the Italian Wars, between France and the House of Habsburg. French explorers, such as Jacques Cartier or Samuel de Champlain, claimed lands in the Americas for France, paving the way for the expansion of the first French colonial empire. The rise of Protestantism in Europe led France to a civil war known as the French Wars of Religion, where, in the most notorious incident, thousands of Huguenots were murdered in the street. Bartholomew's Day Massacre of 1572. The Wars of Religion were ended by Henry Ives' Edict of Nantes, which granted some freedom of religion to the Huguenots. Spanish troops, the terror of Western Europe, assisted the Catholic side during the Wars of Religion in 1589 to 1594, and invaded northern France in 1597. After some skirmishing in the 1620s and 1630s, Spain and France returned to all-out war between 1635 and 1659. The war cost France 300,000 casualties. Under Louis XIII, the energetic Cardinal Richelieu promoted the centralization of the state and reinforced the royal power by disarming domestic power holders in the 1620s. He systematically destroyed castles of defiant lords and denounced the use of private violence, dueling, carrying weapons, and maintaining private army. By the end of 1620s, Richelieu established the royal monopoly of force as the doctrine During Louis XI's minority and the regency of Queen Anne and Cardinal Mazarin, a period of trouble known as the Fronde occurred in France. This rebellion was driven by the great feudal lords and sovereign courts as a reaction to the rise of royal absolute power in France. The monarchy reached its peak during the 17th century and the reign of Louis XIV. By turning powerful feudal lords into courtiers at the Palace of Versailles, Louis XI's personal power became unchallenged. Remembered for his numerous wars, he made France the leading European power. France became the most populous country in Europe and had tremendous influence over European politics, economy, and culture. French became the most used language in diplomacy, science, literature and international affairs, and remained so until the 20th century. France obtained many overseas possessions in the Americas, Africa and Asia. Louis XIV also revoked the Edict of Nantes, forcing thousands of Huguenots into exile. Under Louis XV, Louis XI's great-grandson, France lost New France and most of its Indian possessions after its defeat in the Seven Years' War 1756–63. Its European territory kept growing, however, with notable acquisitions such as Lorraine 1766 and Corsica 1770. An unpopular king, Louis XV's weak rule, his ill-advised financial, political and military decisions as well as the debauchery of his court discredited the monarchy, which arguably paved the way for the French Revolution 15 years after his death. Louis XVI, Louis XV's grandson, actively supported the Americans, who were seeking their independence from Great Britain realized in the Treaty of Paris 1783. The financial crisis aggravated by France's involvement in the American Revolutionary War was one of many contributing factors to the French Revolution. Much of the Enlightenment occurred in French intellectual circles, and major scientific breakthroughs and inventions, such as the discovery of oxygen 1778 and the first hot air balloon carrying passengers 1783, were achieved by French scientists. French explorers, such as Bougainville and Lapérouse, took part in the voyages of scientific exploration through maritime expeditions around the globe. The Enlightenment philosophy, in which reason is advocated as the primary source for legitimacy and authority, undermined the power of and support for the monarchy and helped pave the way for the French Revolution.
Revolutionary France 1789–1799.
Facing financial troubles, King Louis XVI summoned the Estates General gathering the three estates of the realm in May 1789 to propose solutions to his government. As it came to an impasse, the representatives of the Third Estate formed into a National Assembly, signaling the outbreak of the French Revolution. Fearing that the king would suppress the newly created National Assembly, insurgents stormed the Bastille on the 14th of July 1789, a date which would become France's National Day. In early August 1789, the National Constituent Assembly abolished the privileges of the nobility such as personal serfdom and exclusive hunting rights. Through the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, the 27th of August 1789, France established fundamental rights for men. The Declaration affirms the natural and imprescriptible rights of man to liberty, property, security and resistance to oppression. Freedom of speech and press were declared, and arbitrary arrests outlawed. It called for the destruction of aristocratic privileges and proclaimed freedom and equal rights for all men, as well as access to public office based on talent rather than birth. In November 1789, the Assembly decided to nationalize and sell all property of the Roman Catholic Church, which had been the largest landowner in the country. In July 1790, a civil constitution of the clergy reorganized the French Catholic Church, cancelling the authority of the Church to levy taxes, etc. This fueled much discontent in parts of France, which would contribute to the civil war breaking out some years later. While King Louis XVI still enjoyed popularity among the population, his disastrous flight to Var in June 1791 seemed to justify rumors he had tied his hopes of political salvation to the prospects of foreign invasion. His credibility was so deeply undermined that the abolition of the monarchy and establishment of a republic became an increasing possibility. In August 1791, the Emperor of Austria and the King of Prussia in the Declaration of Pillnitz threatened revolutionary France to intervene by force of arms to restore the French absolute monarchy. In September 1791, the National Constituent Assembly forced King Louis XVI to accept the French Constitution of 1791, thus turning the French absolute monarchy into a constitutional monarchy. In the newly established Legislative Assembly October 1791, enmity developed and deepened between a group, later called the Girondins, who favored war with Austria and Prussia, and a group later called Montagnards or Jacobins, who opposed such a war. A majority in the Assembly in 1792 however saw a war with Austria and Prussia as a chance to boost the popularity of the revolutionary government, and thought that France would win a war against those gathered monarchies. On the 20th of April 1792, therefore, they declared war on Austria. On the 10th of August 1792, an angry crowd threatened the palace of King Louis XVI, who took refuge in the Legislative Assembly. A Prussian army invaded France later in August 1792. In early September, Parisians, infuriated by the Prussian army capturing Verdun and counter-revolutionary uprisings in the west of France, murdered between 1,000 and 1,500 prisoners by raiding the Parisian prisons. The Assembly and the Paris City Council seemed unable to stop that bloodshed. The National Convention, chosen in the first elections under male universal suffrage, on the 20th of September 1792 succeeded the Legislative Assembly and on 21 September abolished the monarchy by proclaiming the French First Republic. Ex-King Louis XVI was convicted of treason and guillotined in January 1793. France had declared war on Great Britain and the Dutch Republic in November 1792 and did the same on Spain in March 1793. In the spring of 1793, Austria and Prussia invaded France. In March, France created a sister republic in the Republic of Mainz. Also in March 1793, the civil war of the Vendée against Paris started, evoked by both the civil constitution of the clergy of 1790 and the nationwide army conscription early 1793. Elsewhere in France rebellion was brewing too. A factionalist feud in the National Convention, smouldering ever since October 1791, came to a climax with the group of the Girondins on the 2nd of June 1793 being forced to resign and leave the convention. The counter-revolution, begun in March 1793 in the Vendée, by July had spread to Brittany, Normandy, Bordeaux, Marseille, Toulon, and Lyon. Paris Convention government between October and December 1793 with brutal measures managed to subdue most internal uprisings, at the cost of tens of thousands of lives. Some historians consider the Civil War to have lasted until 1796 with a toll of possibly 450,000 lives. By the end of 1793 the Allies had been driven from France. France in February 1794 abolished slavery in its American colonies, but would reintroduce it later. Political disagreements and enmity in the National Convention between October 1793 and July 1794 reached unprecedented levels, leading to dozens of convention members being sentenced to death and guillotined. Meanwhile, France's external wars in 1794 were going prosperous, for example in Belgium. In 1795, the government seemed to return to indifference towards the desires and needs of the lower classes concerning freedom of Catholic religion and fair distribution of food. Until 1799, politicians, apart from inventing a new parliamentary system, the Directory, busied themselves with dissuading the people from Catholicism and from royalism.
Napoleon in 19th century 1799 to 1914.
Napoleon Bonaparte seized control of the Republic in 1799, becoming first consul and later Emperor of the French Empire 1804 to 1814, 1815. As a continuation of the wars sparked by the European monarchies against the French Republic, changing sets of European coalitions declared wars on Napoleon's empire. His armies conquered most of continental Europe with swift victories such as the battles of Genoastadt or Austerlitz. Members of the Bonaparte family were appointed as monarchs in some of the newly established kingdoms. These victories led to the worldwide expansion of French revolutionary ideals and reforms, such as the metric system, the Napoleonic Code and the Declaration of the Rights of Man. In June 1812, Napoleon attacked Russia, reaching Moscow. Thereafter his army disintegrated through supply problems, disease, Russian attacks, and finally winter. After the catastrophic Russian campaign, and the ensuing uprising of European monarchies against his rule, Napoleon was defeated and the Bourbon monarchy restored. About 1 million Frenchmen died during the Napoleonic Wars. France had colonial possessions, in various forms, since the beginning of the 17th century, but in the 19th and 20th centuries, its global overseas colonial empire extended greatly and became the second largest in the world behind the British Empire. Including metropolitan France, the total area of land under French sovereignty almost reached 13 million square kilometers in the 1920s and 1930s, 8.6% of the world's land. Known as the Belle Epoque, the turn of the century was a period characterized by optimism, regional peace, economic prosperity and technological, scientific and cultural innovations. In 1905, state secularism was officially established.
Contemporary period 1914 present.
France was a member of the Triple Entente when World War I broke out. A small part of northern France was occupied, but France and its allies emerged victorious against the Central Powers at a tremendous human and material cost. World War I left 1.4 million French soldiers dead, 4% of its population. Between 27 and 30% of soldiers conscripted from 1912 to 1915 were killed. The interbellum years were marked by intense international tensions and a variety of social reforms introduced by the Popular Front government: annual leave, 8-hour workdays, women in government. In 1940, France was invaded and occupied by Nazi Germany and Italy. Metropolitan France was divided into a German occupation zone in the north, an Italian occupation zone in the southeast and Vichy France, a newly established authoritarian regime collaborating with Germany, in the south, while Free France, the government in exile led by Charles de Gaulle, was set up in London. From 1942 to 1944, about 160,000 French citizens, including around 75,000 Jews, were deported to death camps and concentration camps in Germany and occupied Poland. In September 1943, Corsica was the first French metropolitan territory to liberate itself from the Axis. On the 6th of June 1944, the Allies invaded Normandy and in August they invaded Provence. Over the following year the Allies and the French resistance emerged victorious over the Axis powers and French sovereignty was restored with the establishment of the Provisional Government of the French Republic (GPRF). This interim government, established by de Gaulle, aimed to continue to wage war against Germany and to purge collaborators from office. It also made several important reforms: suffrage extended to women, creation of a social security system. The GPRF laid the groundwork for a new constitutional order that resulted in the Fourth Republic, which saw spectacular economic growth. Les Trente Glorieuses. France was one of the founding members of NATO. 1949. France attempted to regain control of French Indochina but was defeated by the Viet Minh in 1954 at the climactic Battle of Dien Bien Phu. Only months later, France faced another anti-colonialist conflict in Algeria. The systematic torture and repression, as well as the extrajudicial killings that were perpetrated to keep control of Algeria, then considered as an integral part of France and home to over 1 million European settlers, racked the country and nearly led to a coup and civil war. In 1958, the weak and unstable Fourth Republic gave way to the Fifth Republic, which included a strengthened presidency. In the latter role, Charles de Gaulle managed to keep the country together while taking steps to end the Algerian War. The war was concluded with the Evian Accords in 1962 that led to Algerian independence. The Algerian independence came at a high price. a large toll on the Algerian population. It resulted in 500,000 to 1 million deaths and over 2 million internally displaced Algerians. A vestige of the colonial empire are the French overseas departments and territories. In the context of the Cold War, de Gaulle pursued a policy of national independence towards the Western and Eastern blocs. To this end, he withdrew from NATO's military integrated command while remaining in the NATO alliance itself, launched a nuclear development program, and made France the fourth nuclear power. He restored cordial Franco-German relations to create a European counterweight between the American and Soviet spheres of influence. However, he opposed any development of a supranational Europe, favoring a Europe of sovereign nations. In the wake of the series of worldwide protests of 1968, the revolt of May 1968 had an enormous social impact. In France, it is considered to be the watershed moment when a conservative moral ideal religion, patriotism, respect for authority shifted towards a more liberal moral ideal secularism, individualism, sexual revolution. Although the revolt was a political failure as the Gaullist party emerged even stronger than before it announced a split between the French people and de Gaulle, who resigned shortly after. In the post-Gaullist era, France remained one of the most developed economies in the world, but faced several economic crises that resulted in high unemployment rates and increasing public debt. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, France has been at the forefront of the development of a supranational European Union, notably by signing the Maastricht Treaty, which created the European Union in 1992, establishing the Eurozone in 1999, and signing the Lisbon Treaty in 2007. France has also gradually but fully reintegrated into NATO and has since participated in most NATO-sponsored wars. Since the 19th century, France has received many immigrants. These have been mostly male foreign workers from European Catholic countries who generally returned home when not employed. During the 1970s, France faced economic crisis and allowed new immigrants mostly from the Maghreb. Simultaneously, France renounced the assimilation of immigrants, where they were expected to adhere to French traditional values and cultural norms. They were encouraged to retain their distinctive cultures and traditions and required merely to integrate. Since the 1995 Paris metro and RER bombings, France has been sporadically targeted by Islamist organizations, notably the Charlie Hebdo attack in January 2015, which provoked the largest public rallies in French history, gathering 4 million people. The November 2015 Paris attacks, which resulted in 130 deaths, the deadliest attack on French soil since World War II, and the deadliest in the European Union since the Madrid train bombings in 2004 and the 2016 Nice attack, which caused 87 deaths during Bastille Day celebrations. Operation Chamel, France's military efforts to contain ISIS, killed over 1,000 ISIS troops between 2014 and 2015.
Geography, location and borders.
The vast majority of France's territory and population is situated in Western Europe and is called metropolitan France, to distinguish it from the country's various overseas polities. It is bordered by the North Sea in the north, the English Channel in the northwest, the Atlantic Ocean in the west and the Mediterranean Sea in the southeast. Its land borders consist of Belgium and Luxembourg in the northeast, Germany and Switzerland in the east, Italy and Monaco in the southeast, and Andorra and Spain in the south and southwest. With the exception of the northeast, most of France's land borders are roughly delineated by natural boundaries and geographic features. To the south and southeast, the Pyrenees and the Alps and the Jura, respectively, and to the east, the Rhine River. Due to its shape, France is often referred to as the hexagon. Metropolitan France includes various coastal islands, of which the largest is Corsica. Metropolitan France is situated mostly between latitudes 41 degrees and 51 degrees N, and longitudes 6 degrees W and 10 degrees E, on the western edge of Europe, and thus lies within the northern temperate zone. Its continental part covers about 1,000 kilometers from north to south and from east to west. France has several overseas regions across the world, which are organized as follows. In South America, French Guiana in the Atlantic Ocean, Saint Pierre and Miquelon, and, in the Antilles, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Saint Martin and Saint Barthélemy. In the Pacific Ocean, French Polynesia, the special collectivity of New Caledonia, Wallis and Futuna and Clipperton Island. In the Indian Ocean, Reunion Island, Mayotte, Kerguelen Islands, Crozet Islands, Street Paul and Amsterdam Islands, and the scattered islands in the Indian Ocean. In the Antarctic, Adelie Land. France has land borders with Brazil and Suriname via French Guiana and with the Kingdom of the Netherlands through the French portion of Saint Martin. Metropolitan France covers France's total land area, with its overseas departments and territories excluding Adelie Land, is 0.45% of the total land area on Earth. France possesses a wide variety of landscapes, from coastal plains in the north and west to mountain ranges of the Alps in the southeast, the Massif Central in the south-central and Pyrenees in the southwest. Due to its numerous overseas departments and territories scattered across the planet, France possesses the second largest exclusive economic zone in the world, covering 11,035,000 kilometers to 4,260,000 miles to, just behind the is of the United States, which covers 11,351,000 kilometers to 4,383,000 miles to, but ahead of the ease of Australia, which covers 8,148,250 kilometers to 4,111,312 miles to. Its is covers approximately 8% of the total surface of all the isles of the world.
Geology, topography and hydrography.
Metropolitan France has a wide variety of topographical sets and natural landscapes. Large parts of the current territory of France were raised during several tectonic episodes like the Hercynian uplift in the Paleozoic era, during which the Armorican Massif, the Massif Central, the Morvan, the Vosges and Ardennes ranges and the island of Corsica were formed. These massifs delineate several sedimentary basins such as the Aquitaine Basin in the southwest and the Paris Basin in the north, the latter including several areas of particularly fertile ground such as the silt beds of Beauce and Brie. Various routes of natural passage, such as the Rhone Valley, allow easy communications. The Alpine, Pyrenean and Jura mountains are much younger and have less eroded forms. At above sea level, Montana Blanc, located in the Alps on the French and Italian border, is the highest point in Western Europe. Although 60% of municipalities are classified as having seismic risks, these risks remain moderate. The coastlines offer contrasting landscapes, mountain ranges along the French Riviera, coastal cliffs such as the Côte d'Alberta, and wide sandy plains in the Languedoc. Corsica lies off the Mediterranean coast. France has an extensive river system consisting of the four major rivers Seine, the Loire, the Garonne, the Rhône and their tributaries, whose combined catchment includes over 62% of the metropolitan territory. The Rhône divides the Massif Central from the Alps and flows into the Mediterranean Sea at the Camargue. The Garonne meets the Dordogne just after Bordeaux, forming the Gironde estuary, the largest estuary in Western Europe, which after approximately 100 kilometers (62 mi) empties into the Atlantic Ocean. Other watercourses drain towards the Meuse and Rhine along the northeastern borders. France has of marine waters within 3 oceans under its jurisdiction, of which 97% are overseas.
Climate.
Most of the low-lying areas of metropolitan France are located in the Oceanic Climate Zone, CFB and CFC in the Köppen classification. Corsica and a small part of the territory bordering the Mediterranean basin lies in the XAN-CSB zones. As the French metropolitan territory is relatively large, the climate is not uniform, giving rise to the following climate nuances. The west of France has strictly oceanic climate CFB. It extends from Flanders to the Basque Country in a coastal strip several tens of kilometers wide, narrower to the north and south but wider in Brittany, which is almost entirely in this climate zone. Cities: Orléans, Rennes, Nantes, La Rochelle. The climate of the southwest is also oceanic but warmer. Cities: Limoges, Toulouse, Albi, Bordeaux, Biarritz. The climate of the northwest is oceanic but cooler and windier. Cities: Caen, Rouen, Lille, Amiens. Away from the coast, the climate is oceanic throughout, but its characteristics change somewhat. The Paris sedimentary basin and, more so, the basins protected by mountain chains show a stronger seasonal temperature variability and less rainfall during autumn and winter. Therefore, most of the territory has a semi-oceanic climate and forms a transition zone between strictly oceanic climate near the coasts and other climate zones. The semi-continental climate abnormal CFB of the north and centre-east Alsace, plains of the Saône, the middle part of the Rhône, Dauphine, Auvergne and Savoy. Cities: Saint-Étienne, Clermont-Ferrand, Grenoble, Chambéry, Montmelion, Mulhouse, Besançon, Lyon-Kfa borderline, Langres, Charleville-Mézières, Chaumont. The Mediterranean and the lower Rhône Valley experience a Mediterranean climate and CSB due to the effect of mountain chains isolating them from the rest of the country and the resulting Mistral and Tramontane winds. Cities: Marseille, Avignon, Nice CFB borderline, Menton CFB borderline, Toulon, High-Ears, Montpellier, Perpignan. The mountain or alpine climates highlands, DFB, DFC and DT are confined to the Alps, the Pyrenees and the summits of the Massif Central, the Jura and the Vosges. Cities: Annecy, Gap, Briançon, Bug Saint-Maurice, Saint-Gilles. In the overseas regions, there are three broad types of climate: a tropical climate in most overseas regions including Eastern French Guiana, high constant temperature throughout the year with a dry and a wet season. An equatorial climate in Western French Guiana, high constant temperature with even precipitation throughout the year. A subpolar climate in Saint-Pierre and Miquelon and in most of the French southern and Antarctic lands. Short mild summers and long very cold winters. Cities: Port-au-Prince, Dumont d'Urville.
Environment.
France was one of the first countries to create an environment ministry, in 1971. Although it is one of the most industrialized countries in the world, France is ranked only 17th by carbon dioxide emissions, behind less populous nations such as Canada or Australia. This is due to the country's heavy investment in nuclear power following the 1973 oil crisis, which now accounts for 75% of its electricity production and results in less pollution. According to the 2018 Environmental Performance Index conducted by Yale and Columbia, France was the second most environmentally conscious country in the world after Switzerland, compared to 10th place in 2016 and 27th in 2014. Like all European Union state members, France agreed to cut carbon emissions by at least 20% of 1990 levels by the year 2020, compared to the United States' plan to reduce emissions by 4% of 1990 levels. French carbon dioxide emissions per capita were lower than that of China's. The country was set to impose a carbon tax in 2009 at €17 per tonne of carbon emitted, which would have raised €4 billion of revenue annually. However, the plan was abandoned due to fears of burdening French businesses. Forests account for 31% of France's land area, the fourth highest proportion in Europe, representing an increase of 7% since 1990. French forests are some of the most diverse in Europe, comprising more than 140 species of trees. There are 9 national parks and 46 natural parks in France, with the government planning to convert 20% of its exclusive economic zone into a marine protected area by 2020. A regional nature park or PNR is a public establishment in France between local authorities and the French national government covering an inhabited rural area of outstanding beauty, to protect the scenery and heritage as well as setting up sustainable economic development in the area. A PNR sets goals and guidelines for managed human habitation, sustainable economic development, and protection of the natural environment based on each park's unique landscape and heritage. The parks foster ecological research programs and public education in the natural sciences. There are 54 PNRs in France.
Administrative divisions.
The French Republic is divided into 18 regions located in Europe and overseas, 5 overseas collectivities, 1 overseas territory, 1 special collectivity, New Caledonia, and 1 uninhabited island directly under the authority of the Minister of Overseas France. Clipperton, regions. Since 2016, France is mainly divided into 18 administrative regions, 13 regions in metropolitan France including the territorial collectivity of Corsica, and 5 located overseas, which are numbered mainly alphabetically. This number is used in postal codes and was formerly used on vehicle number plates. Among the 101 departments of France, 5 French Guiana, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Mayotte, and Réunion are in overseas regions ROMs that are also simultaneously overseas departments DOMs, enjoy exactly the same status as metropolitan departments and are an integral part of the European Union. The 101 departments are subdivided into 335 arrondissements, which are, in turn, subdivided into 2,054 cantons. These cantons are then divided into 36,658 communes, which are municipalities with an elected municipal council, whose value is strictly linked to that of the euro. In contrast, the 5 overseas regions used the French franc and now use the euro.
Politics, government.
The French Republic is a unitary semi-presidential representative democratic republic with strong democratic traditions. The Constitution of the Fifth Republic was approved by referendum on the 28th of September 1958. It greatly strengthened the authority of the executive in relation to Parliament. The executive branch itself has 2 leaders. The President of the Republic, currently Emmanuel Macron, who is head of state and is elected directly by universal adult suffrage for a 5-year term, formerly 7 years, and the government, led by the president-appointed prime minister. The French parliament is a bicameral legislature comprising a National Assembly, Assemblée Nationale, and a Senate. The National Assembly deputies represent local constituencies and are directly elected for 5-year terms. The Assembly has the power to dismiss the government, and thus the majority in the Assembly determines the choice of government. Senators are chosen by an electoral college for 6-year terms, originally 9-year terms, and 1/2 of the seats are submitted to election every 3 years. The Senate's legislative powers are limited. In the event of disagreement between the 2 chambers, the National Assembly has the final say. The government has a strong influence in shaping the agenda of Parliament. Until World War II, radicals were a strong political force in France, embodied by the Republican, Radical and Radical Socialist Party, which was the most important party of the Third Republic. Since World War II, they were marginalized while French politics became characterized by 2 politically opposed groupings, one left-wing, centered on the French section of the Workers' International and its successor the Socialist Party since 1969, and the other right-wing, centered on the Gaullist Party, whose name changed over time to the Rally of the French People 1947, the Union of Democrats for the Republic 1958, the Rally for the Republic 1976, the Union for a Popular Movement 2007, and the Republicans since 2015. In the 2017 presidential and legislative elections, radical centrist party En Marche became the dominant force, overtaking both socialists and Republicans. As of 2017, voter turnout was 75% during recent elections, higher than the ECD average of 68%.
Law.
France uses a civil legal system, wherein law arises primarily from written statutes, while administrative law is often a subcategory of civil law in many countries. It is completely separated in France, and each body of law is headed by a specific Supreme Court. Ordinary courts which handle criminal and civil litigation are headed by the Court of Cassation, and administrative courts are headed by the Council of State. To be applicable, every law must be officially published in the Journal officiel de la République française. France does not recognize religious law as a motivation for the enactment of prohibitions. It has long abolished blasphemy laws and sodomy laws, the latter in 1791. However, offences against public decency, contraires aux bonnes mœurs, or disturbing public order, trouble à l'ordre public, have been used to repress public expressions of homosexuality or street prostitution. Since 1999, civil unions for homosexual couples are permitted, and since 2013, same-sex marriage and LGBT adoption are legal. Laws prohibiting discriminatory speech in the press are as old as 1881. Some consider hate speech laws in France to be too broad or severe, undermining index on censorship. France, strict defamation and privacy laws limit free expression. Index on censorship. Index on censorship. N. P. N. D. Web. 26 February 2014. France has laws against racism and antisemitism, while the 1990 Gaysot Act prohibits Holocaust denial. Freedom of religion is constitutionally guaranteed by the 1789 Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. The 1905 French law on the separation of the churches and the state is the basis for laicite state secularism. The state does not formally recognize any religion, except in Alsace-Moselle. Nonetheless, it does recognize religious associations. The Parliament has listed many religious movements as dangerous cults since 1995, and has banned wearing conspicuous religious symbols in schools since 2004. In 2010, it banned the wearing of face-covering Islamic veils in public. Human rights groups such as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch describe the law as discriminatory towards Muslims. However, it is supported by most of the population.
Foreign relations.
France is a founding member of the United Nations and serves as one of the permanent members of the UN Security Council with veto rights. In 2015, France was described as being the best networked state in the world, because it is a country that is member of more multilateral organizations than any other country. France is a member of the G8, World Trade Organization WTO, the Secretariat of the Pacific Community SPC, and the Indian Ocean Commission COI. It is an associate member of the Association of Caribbean States ACS and a leading member of the International Francophone Organization OIF of 84 fully or partly French-speaking countries. As a significant hub for international relations, France hosts the second-largest assembly of diplomatic missions in the world and the headquarters of international organizations including the ECT, UNESCO, Interpol, the International Bureau of Weights and Measures, and La Francophonie. Post-war French foreign policy has been largely shaped by membership of the European Union, of which it was a founding member. Since the 1960s, France has developed close ties with reunified Germany to become the most influential driving force of the EU. In the 1960s, France sought to exclude the British from the European unification process, seeking to build its own standing in continental Europe. However, since 1904, France has maintained an entente cordiale with the United Kingdom, and there has been a strengthening of links between the countries, especially militarily. France is a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization NATO, but under President de Gaulle, it excluded itself from the Joint Military Command to protest the special relationship between the United States and Britain and to preserve the independence of French foreign and security policies. However, as a result of Nicolas Sarkozy's pro-American politics much criticized in France by the leftists and by a part of the right, France rejoined the NATO Joint Military Command on 4 April 2009. In the early 1990s, the country drew considerable criticism from other nations for its underground nuclear tests in French Polynesia. France vigorously opposed the 2003 invasion of Iraq, straining bilateral relations with the United States and the United Kingdom. France retains strong political and economic influence in its former African colonies France-Afrique and has supplied economic aid and troops for peacekeeping missions in Ivory Coast and Chad. Recently, After the unilateral declaration of independence of northern Mali by the Tuareg MNLA and the subsequent regional northern Mali conflict with several Islamist groups including Ansar Dine and Mojwa, France and other African states intervened to help the Malian army to retake control. In 2017, France was the fourth largest donor in absolute terms of development aid in the world, behind the United States, Germany, and the United Kingdom. This represents 0.43% of its GNP, the 12th highest among the ECT. The organization managing the French help is the French Development Agency, which finances primarily humanitarian projects in sub-Saharan Africa.
Military.
The French Armed Forces Armées Françaises are the military and paramilitary forces of France, under the President of the Republic as Supreme Commander. They consist of the French Army Armée de Terre, French Navy Marine Nationale, formerly called Armée de Mer, the French Air Force Armée de l'Air, the French Strategic Nuclear Force Force Nucléaire Stratégique, nicknamed Force de Frappe or Strike Force, and the military police called National Gendarmerie Nationale, which also fulfills civil police duties in the rural areas of France. Together they are among the largest armed forces in the world and the largest in the EU. While the gendarmerie is an integral part of the French armed forces, gendarmes are career soldiers, and therefore under the purview of the Ministry of the Armed Forces. It is operationally attached to the Ministry of the Interior as far as its civil police duties are concerned. When acting as general-purpose police force, the gendarmerie encompasses the counter-terrorist units of the Parachute Intervention Squadron of the National Gendarmerie Escadron Parachutiste d'Intervention de la Gendarmerie Nationale, the National Gendarmerie Intervention Group Groupe d'Intervention de la Gendarmerie Nationale, the search sections of the National Gendarmerie Sections de Recherche de la Gendarmerie Nationale, responsible for criminal inquiries, and the mobile brigades of the National Gendarmerie Brigades Mobiles de la Gendarmerie Nationale, or in short Gendarmerie Mobile, which have the task to maintain public order. The following special units are also part of the gendarmerie: the Republican Guard Garde Républicaine, which protects public buildings hosting major French institutions; the Maritime Gendarmerie Maritime serving as Coast Guard; the Provost Service Prévôt, acting as the military police branch of the gendarmerie. As far as the French intelligence units are concerned, the Directorate General for External Security, Direction Générale de la Sécurité Extérieure, is considered to be a component of the armed forces under the authority of the Ministry of Defense. The other, the Central Directorate for Interior Intelligence, Direction Centrale du Renseignement Intérieur, is a division of the National Police Force, Direction Générale de la Police Nationale, and therefore reports directly to the Ministry of the Interior. There has been no national conscription since 1997. France has a special military corps, the French Foreign Legion, founded in 1830, which consists of foreign nationals from over 140 countries who are willing to serve in the French armed forces and become French citizens after the end of their service period. The only other countries having similar units are Spain. The Spanish Foreign Legion, called Tercio, was founded in 1920, and Luxembourg. Foreigners can serve in the National Army provided they speak Luxembourgish. France is a permanent member of the Security Council of the UN, and a recognized nuclear state since 1960. France has signed and ratified the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty (CTBT) and acceded to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. France's annual military expenditure in 2018 was $63 billion, or 2.3% of its GDP, making it the fifth biggest military spender in the world after the United States, China, Saudi Arabia, and India. French nuclear deterrence, formerly known as Force de Frappe, relies on complete independence. The current French nuclear force consists of 4 Triomphant-class submarines equipped with submarine-launched ballistic missiles. In addition to the submarine fleet, it is estimated that France has about 60 ASMP medium-range air-to-ground missiles with nuclear warheads, of which around 50 are deployed by the Air Force using the Mirage 2000 Newtons long-range nuclear strike aircraft, while around 10 are deployed by the French Navy's superintended modernized some attack aircraft, which operate from the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle. The new Rafale F-3 aircraft will gradually replace all Mirage 2000 Newtons and some in the nuclear strike role with the improved ASMPA missile with a nuclear warhead. France has major military industries with one of the largest aerospace industries in the world. Its industries have produced such equipment as the Rafale fighter, the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier, the Exocet missile and the Leclerc tank among others. Despite withdrawing from the Eurofighter project, France is actively investing in European joint projects such as the Eurocopter Tiger, multi-purpose frigates, the UCAF demonstrator Neuron and the Airbus A400M. France is a major arms seller, with most of its arsenal's designs available for the export market with the notable exception of nuclear-powered devices. The Bastille Day military parade held in Paris each 14 July for France's National Day, called Bastille Day in English-speaking countries referred to in France as Fête Nationale, is the oldest and largest regular military parade in Europe. Other smaller parades are organized across the country.
Government finance.
The government of France has run a budget deficit each year since the early 1970s. French government debt levels reached 2 trillion euros, the equivalent of 96.4% of French GDP. In late 2012, credit rating agencies warned that growing French government debt levels risked France's AAA credit rating, raising the possibility of a future downgrade and subsequent higher borrowing costs for the French authorities.
Economy.
A member of the Group of Seven, formerly Group of Eight leading industrialized countries, it is ranked as the world's 10th largest and the EU's second largest economy by purchasing power parity. France has a mixed economy that combines extensive private enterprise with substantial state enterprise and government intervention. The government retains considerable influence over key segments of infrastructure sectors, with majority ownership of railway, electricity, aircraft, nuclear power and telecommunications. The World Factbook ranked France 7th largest exporter. In 2008, France was the third largest recipient of foreign direct investment among ECT countries at $118 billion. Ranking behind Luxembourg, where foreign direct investment was essentially monetary transfers to banks located there, and the United States $316 billion, but above the United Kingdom $96.9 billion, Germany $25 billion, or Japan $24 billion. In the same year, French companies invested $220 billion outside France, ranking France as the second largest outward direct investor in the ECT, behind the United States $311 billion, and ahead of the UK $111 billion, Japan $128 billion and Germany $157 billion. Financial services, banking and the insurance sector are an important part of the economy. Three largest financial institutions cooperatively owned by their customers are located in France. The Paris Stock Exchange is an old institution, created by Louis XV in 1724. In 2000, the stock exchanges of Paris, Amsterdam and Brussels merged into Euronext. In 2007, Euronext merged with the New York Stock Exchange to form NYSE Euronext, the world's largest stock exchange. French companies have maintained key positions in the insurance and banking industries. AXA is the world's largest insurance company. The leading French banks are BNP Paribas and the Crédit Agricole, ranking as the world's first and sixth largest banks in 2010 by assets, while the Société Générale Group was ranked the world's eighth largest in 2009.
Agriculture.
France has historically been a large producer of agricultural products. Extensive tracts of fertile land, the application of modern technology, and EU subsidies have combined to make France the leading agricultural producer and exporter in Europe, representing 20% of the EU's agricultural production and the world's third biggest exporter of agricultural products. Wheat, poultry, dairy, beef, and pork, as well as internationally recognized processed foods are the primary French agricultural exports. Rose wines are primarily consumed within the country, but Champagne and Bordeaux wines are major exports, being known worldwide. EU agriculture subsidies to France have decreased in recent years but still amounted to $8 billion in 2007. That same year, France sold 33.4 billion euros of transformed agricultural products. France produces rum via sugarcane-based distilleries, almost all of which are located in overseas territories such as Martinique, Guadeloupe and La Réunion. Agriculture is an important sector of France's economy. 3.8% of the active population is employed in agriculture, whereas the total agri-food industry made up 4.2% of French GDP in 2005. The most popular tourist sites include annual visitors, Eiffel Tower 6.2 million, Château de Versailles 2.8 million, Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle 2 million, Pont du Gard 1.5 million, Arc de Triomphe 1.2 million, Montana Saint-Michel 1 million, Saint-Chapelle 683,000, Château du Haut-Königsberg 549,000, Puy-de-Dôme 500,000, Musée Picasso 441,000, and Carcassonne 362,000.
Paris.
France, especially Paris, has some of the world's largest and most renowned museums, including the Louvre, which is the most visited art museum in the world. 5.7 million, the Musée d'Orsay 2.1 million, mostly devoted to Impressionism, and St. George's Pompidou 1.2 million, dedicated to contemporary art. Disneyland Paris is Europe's most popular theme park, with 15 million combined visitors to the resort's Disneyland Park and Walt Disney Studios Park in 2009.
French Riviera.
With more than 10 million tourists a year, the French Riviera French, Côte d'Azur, in southeast France, is the second leading tourist destination in the country, after the Paris region. It benefits from 300 days of sunshine per year, of coastline and beaches, 18 golf courses, 14 ski resorts and 3,000 restaurants.
Château.
With 6 million tourists a year, the castles of the Loire Valley French, Château and the Loire Valley itself are the third leading tourist destination in France. This World Heritage Site is noteworthy for its architectural heritage, in its historic towns but in particular its castles, such as the Château d'Amboise, de Chambord, Diaz, de Villandry, Chenonceau-Montserrat, the Château de Chantilly, Versailles and Vaux-le-Vicomte, all three located near Paris, are also visitor attractions.
UNESCO World Heritage Sites and Protected Areas.
France has 37 sites inscribed in UNESCO's World Heritage List and features cities of high cultural interest, beaches and seaside resorts, ski resorts, and rural regions that many enjoy for their beauty and tranquility. Green tourism. Small and picturesque French villages are promoted through the association Les Plus Beaux Villages de France, literally the most beautiful villages of France. The Remarkable Gardens label is a list of the over 200 gardens classified by the French Ministry of Culture. This label is intended to protect and promote remarkable gardens and parks. France attracts many religious pilgrims on their way to St. James, or to Lourdes, a town in the Hautes-Pyrénées that hosts several million visitors a year.
Energy.
Électricité de France EDF, the main electricity generation and distribution company in France, is also one of the world's largest producers of electricity. In 2003, it produced 22% of the European Union's electricity, primarily from nuclear power. France is the smallest emitter of carbon dioxide among the G8, due to its heavy investment in nuclear power. 72% of the electricity produced by France is generated by 58 nuclear power plants. In this context, renewable energies are having difficulty taking off. France also uses hydroelectric dams to produce electricity, such as the Igouzen Dam, Étang de Solsum, and Lac de Vaux-Glans.
Transport.
The railway network of France, which stretches is the second most extensive in Western Europe after that of Germany. It is operated by the SNCF, and high-speed trains include the Thalys, the Eurostar and TGV, which travels in commercial use. The Eurostar, along with the Eurotunnel shuttle, connects with the United Kingdom through the Channel Tunnel. Rail connections exist to all other neighbouring countries in Europe, except Andorra. Intra-urban connections are also well developed with both underground services Paris, Lyon, Lille, Marseille, Toulouse, Rennes and tramway services Nantes, Strasbourg, Bordeaux, Grenoble, Montpellier. Complementing bus services. There are approximately of serviceable roadway in France, ranking it the most extensive network of the European continent. The Paris region is enveloped with the most dense network of roads and highways that connect it with virtually all parts of the country. French roads also handle substantial international traffic, connecting with cities in neighboring Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Spain, Andorra and Monaco. There is no annual registration fee or road tax, however. Usage of the mostly privately owned motorways is through tolls except in the vicinity of large communes. The new car market is dominated by domestic brands such as Renault. 27% of cars sold in France in 2003, Peugeot 21% and Citroën 13.5%. Over 70% of new cars sold in 2004 had diesel engines, far more than contained petrol or LPG engines. France possesses the Millau Viaduct, the world's tallest bridge, and has built many important bridges such as the Pont de Normandie. There are 464 airports in France, which also is the largest bordering the Mediterranean Sea. Of waterways traverse France including the Canal du Midi, which connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Atlantic Ocean through the Garonne River. The University of Paris, founded in the mid-12th century, is still one of the most important universities in the Western world. In the 17th century, mathematician René Descartes defined a method for the acquisition of scientific knowledge, while Blaise Pascal became famous for his work on probability and fluid mechanics. They were both key figures of the scientific revolution, which blossomed in Europe during this period. The Academy of Sciences was founded by Louis XIV to encourage and protect the spirit of French scientific research. It was at the forefront of scientific developments in Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries. It is one of the earliest academies of sciences. The Age of Enlightenment was marked by the work of biologist Buffon and chemist Lavoisier, who discovered the role of oxygen in combustion, while Diderot and D'Alembert published the Encyclopédie, which aimed to give access to useful knowledge to the people, a knowledge that they can apply to their everyday life. With the Industrial Revolution, the 19th century saw spectacular scientific developments in France with scientists such as Augustin Fresnel, founder of modern optics, Sadi Carnot who laid the foundations of thermodynamics, and Louis Pasteur, a pioneer of microbiology. Other eminent French scientists of the 19th century have their names inscribed on the Eiffel Tower. Famous French scientists of the 20th century include the mathematician and physicist Henri Poincaré, physicists Henri Becquerel, Pierre and Marie Curie, who remained famous for their work on radioactivity, the physicist Paul Langevin and virologist Luc Montagnier, co-discoverer of HIV/AIDS. Hand transplantation was developed on the 23rd of September 1998 in Lyon by a team assembled from different countries around the world including Jean-Michel Dubonet who, shortly thereafter, performed the first successful double-hand transplant. Telesurgery was developed by Jacques Mescox and his team on the 7th of September 2001 across the Atlantic Ocean, New York, Strasbourg, Lindbergh operation. A face transplant was first done on the 27th of November 2005 by Dr. Bernard Dvorchel. France was the fourth country to achieve nuclear capability and has the third largest nuclear weapons arsenal in the world. It is also a leader in civilian nuclear technology. France was the third nation, after the former USSR and the United States, to launch its own space satellite and remains the biggest contributor to the European Space Agency (ESA). The European Airbus, formed from the French group Aérospatiale along with Daimler Chrysler Aerospace AG DASA and Construcciones Aeronauticas Sarcasa, designs and develops civil and military aircraft as well as communications systems, missiles, space rockets, helicopters, satellites, and related systems. France also hosts major international research instruments such as the European Synchrotron Radiation Facility or the Institut Le Langevin and remains a major member of CERN. It also owns Minatech, Europe's leading nanotechnology research center. The SNCF, the French National Railroad Company, has developed the TGV, a high-speed train which holds a series of world speed records. The TGV has been the fastest wheeled train in commercial use since reaching a speed of on the 3rd of April 2007. Western Europe is now serviced by a network of TGV lines. 69 French people have been awarded a Nobel Prize and 12 have received the Fields Medal.
Demographics.
With an estimated 2017 population of 15 million people, France is the 20th most populous country in the world, the third most populous in Europe after Russia and Germany, and the second most populous in the European Union after Germany. France is an outlier among developed countries in general, and European countries in particular, in having a relatively high rate of natural population growth. By birth rates alone, it was responsible for almost all natural population growth in the European Union in 2006. Between 2006 and 2016, France saw the second highest overall increase in population in the EU, and was one of only 4 EU countries where natural births accounted for most population growth. This was the highest rate since the end of the baby boom in 1973. And coincides with the rise of the total fertility rate from an nadir of 1.7 in 1994 to 2.0 in 2010. The fertility rate declined slightly to 1.93 children per woman, below the replacement rate of 2.1, and considerably below the high of 4.41 in 1800. France's fertility rate and crude birth rate nonetheless remain among the highest in the EU. However, like many developed nations, France's population is aging. The average age is 42.6 years, while close to a fifth of French people are 65 or over. Average life expectancy at birth is 82.2 years, the 9th highest in the world. From 2006 to 2011 population growth averaged 0.6% per year. Since 2011, annual growth has been between 0.4% and 0.5% annually. Immigrants are major contributors to this trend. In 2010, 27% of newborns in metropolitan France had at least one foreign-born parent and 24% had at least one parent born outside of Europe excluding French overseas territories.
Ethnic groups.
Most French people are of Celtic Gauls origin, with an admixture of Italic Romans and Germanic Franks groups. Different regions reflect this diverse heritage, with notable Breton elements in western France, Aquitanian in the southwest, Scandinavian in the northwest, Alemannic in the northeast and Ligurian in the southeast. Large-scale immigration over the last century and a half has led to a more multicultural society. In 2004, the Institut Montaigne estimated that within metropolitan France, 51 million people were white, 85% of the population, 6 million were Northwest African, 10%, 2 million were black, 3%, and 1 million were Asian, 7%. Since the French Revolution, and as codified in the 1958 French Constitution, it is illegal for the French state to collect data on ethnicity and ancestry. In 2008, the Taux Trajectories and Origins poll conducted jointly by and the French National Institute of Statistics estimated that 5 million people were of Italian ancestry, the largest immigrant community, followed by 3 million to 6 million of Northwest African ancestry, 2.5 million of Sub-Saharan African origin, 500,000 ethnic Armenian, and 200,000 people of Turkish ancestry. There are also sizable minorities of other European ethnic groups, namely Spanish, Portuguese, Polish, and Greek. France has a significant Gypsy-Ghitan population, numbering between 20,000 and 400,000. Many foreign Romani people are expelled back to Bulgaria and Romania frequently. It is currently estimated that 40% of the French population is descended at least partially from the different waves of immigration the country has received since the early 20th century. Between 1921 and 1935 alone, about 1 million net immigrants came to France. The next largest wave came in the 1960s, when around 1.6 million Pieds-Noirs returned to France following the independence of its Northwest African possessions, Algeria and Morocco. They were joined by numerous former colonial subjects from North and West Africa, as well as numerous European immigrants from Spain and Portugal. France remains a major destination for immigrants, accepting about 200,000 legal immigrants annually. In 2005, it was Western Europe's leading recipient of asylum seekers, with an estimated 50,000 applications, albeit 15% decrease from 2004. In 2010, France received about 48,100 asylum applications, placing it among the top 5 asylum recipients in the world, and in subsequent years it saw the number of applications increase, ultimately doubling to 100,412 in 2017. The European Union allows free movement between the member states, although France established controls to curb Eastern European migration, and immigration remains a contentious political issue. In 2008, the INSEE National Institute of Statistics and Economic Studies estimated that the total number of foreign-born immigrants was around 5 million, 8% of the population, while their French-born descendants numbered 6.5 million, or 11% of the population. Thus, nearly a fifth of the country's population were either first or second-generation immigrants, of which more than 5 million were of European origin and 4 million of Maghrebi ancestry. In 2008, France granted citizenship to 137,000 persons, mostly from Morocco, Algeria and Turkey. In 2014, the INSEE published a study which reported doubling of the number of Spanish immigrants, Portuguese and Italians in France between 2009 and 2012. According to the French Institute, this increase resulting from the financial crisis that hit several European countries in that period, has pushed up the number of Europeans installed in France. Statistics on Spanish immigrants in France show a growth of 107% between 2009 and 2012, i.e., in this period went from 5,300 to 11,000 people, being Paris 12,568,755 in, Lyon 2,310,850, Marseille 1,756,296, Toulouse 1,345,343, Bordeaux 1,232,550, Lille 1,187,824, Nice 1,006,402, Nantes 961,521, Strasbourg 785,839 and Rennes 727,357. Note: there are significant differences between the metropolitan population figures just cited and those in the following table, which indicates the population of the communes. Rural flight was a perennial political issue throughout most of the 20th century.
Language.
According to Article 2 of the Constitution, the official language of France is French, a Romance language derived from Latin. Since 1635, the Académie Française has been France's official authority on the French language, although its recommendations carry no legal weight. There are also regional languages spoken in France, such as Occitan, Breton, Catalan, Flemish Dutch dialect, Alsatian German dialect, Basque, and Corsican. Italian was the official language of Corsica until the 9th of May 1859. The government of France does not regulate the choice of language in publications by individuals, but the use of French is required by law in commercial and workplace communications. In addition to mandating the use of French in the territory of the Republic, the French government tries to promote French in the European Union and globally through institutions such as the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie. The perceived threat from Anglicization has prompted efforts to safeguard the position of the French language in France. Besides French, there exist 77 vernacular minority languages of France, 8 spoken in French metropolitan territory and 69 in the French overseas territories. From the 17th to the mid-20th century, French served as the preeminent international language of diplomacy and international affairs, as well as a lingua franca among the educated classes of Europe. The dominant position of French language in international affairs was overtaken by English, since the emergence of the United States as a major power. For most of the time in which French served as an international lingua franca, it was not the native language of most Frenchmen. A report in 1794 conducted by Henri Grégoire found that of the country's 25 million people, only 3 million spoke French natively. The rest spoke one of the country's many regional languages, such as Alsatian, Breton or Occitan. Through the expansion of public education, in which French was the sole language of instruction, as well as other factors such as increased urbanization and the rise of mass communication, French gradually came to be adopted by virtually the entire population, a process not completed until the 20th century. As a result of France's extensive colonial ambitions between the 17th and 20th centuries, French was introduced to the Americas, Africa, Polynesia, Southeast Asia, as well as the Caribbean. French is the second most studied foreign language in the world after English, and is a lingua franca in some regions, notably in Africa. The legacy of French as a living language outside Europe is mixed. It is nearly extinct in some former French colonies, the Levant, South and Southeast Asia, while Creoles and pidgins based on French have emerged in the French departments in the West Indies and the South Pacific French Polynesia. On the other hand, many former French colonies have adopted French as an official language, and the total number of French speakers is increasing, especially in Africa. It is estimated that between 300 million and 500 million people worldwide can speak French, either as a mother tongue or a second language. According to the 2007 Adult Education Survey, part of a project by the European Union and carried in France by the INSEE and based on a sample of 15,350 persons, French was the first mother tongue of 87.2% of the total population, or roughly 81 million people, followed by Arabic 3.6%. 30 million, Portuguese 1.5%, 96 million, Spanish 1.2%, 77 million and Italian 1.0%, 64 million. People who had other languages as their mother tongue made up the 5.2% of the population.
Religion.
France is a secular country, and freedom of religion is a constitutional right. French religious policy is based on the concept of laïcité, a strict separation of church and state under which public life is kept completely secular. According to a survey held in 2016 by Institut Montaigne and Institut Français d'Opinion Publique IFOP, 51.1% of the total population of France was Christian as of that year. At the same time 39.6% of the population had no religion, atheism or agnosticism, 5.6% were Muslims, 2.5% were followers of other faiths, and the remaining 0.4% were undecided about their faith. The current Jewish community in France, about 0.8% of the population are religious Jews. During the French Revolution, activists conducted a brutal campaign of de-Christianization, ending the Catholic Church as the state religion. In some cases clergy and churches were attacked, with iconoclasm stripping the churches of statues and ornament. After the back and forth of Catholic royal and secular republican governments during the 19th century, France established laicite by passage of the 1905 law on the separation of the churches and the state. Since 1905 the French government has followed the principle of laicite, in which it is prohibited from recognizing any specific right to a religious community except for legacy statutes like those of military chaplains and the local law in Alsace-Moselle. It recognizes religious organizations according to formal legal criteria that do not address religious doctrine. Conversely, religious organizations are expected to refrain from intervening in policy making. Certain groups, such as Scientology, Children of God, the Unification Church, or the Order of the Solar Temple, are considered cults sects in French, and therefore do not have the same status as recognized religions in France. Sect is considered a pejorative term in France.
Health.
The French healthcare system is one of universal healthcare largely financed by government national health insurance. In its 2000 assessment of world healthcare systems, the World Health Organization found that France provided the close to best overall health care in the world. The French healthcare system was ranked first worldwide by the World Health Organization in 1997. In 2011, France spent 11.6% of GDP on health care, or $4,086 per capita, a figure much higher than the average spent by countries in Europe but less than in the United States. Approximately 77% of health expenditures are covered by government-funded agencies. Care is generally free for people affected by chronic diseases, affections de longue durée such as cancer, AIDS or cystic fibrosis. Average life expectancy at birth is 78 years for men and 85 years for women, one of the highest of the European Union and the world. There are 3.22 physicians for every 1,000 inhabitants in France, and average healthcare spending per capita was $4,719 in 2008. Approximately 140,000 inhabitants. 4% of France are living with HIV/AIDS. France, like other rich countries, faces an increasing and recent epidemic of obesity, due mostly to the replacement in French eating habits of traditional healthy French cuisine by junk food. The French obesity rate is still far below that of the United States. The obesity rate in France is the same as the United States had in the 1970s. And fight it fiercely. Rates of childhood obesity are slowing in France, while continuing to grow in other countries.
Education.
In 1802, Napoleon created the lycée. Nevertheless, it is Jules Ferry who is considered to be the father of the French modern school, which is free, secular, and compulsory until the age of 13. Since 1882, school attendance in France is now compulsory until the age of 16. Nowadays, the schooling system in France is centralized, and is composed of 3 stages: primary education, secondary education, and higher education. The program for international student assessment, coordinated by the ECT, ranked France's education as about the ECT average in 2015. Primary and secondary education are predominantly public, run by the Ministry of National Education. In France, education is compulsory from 6 to 16 years old, and the public school is secular and free. While training and remuneration of teachers and the curriculum are the responsibility of the state centrally, the management of primary and secondary schools is overseen by local authorities. Primary education comprises 2 phases: nursery school école maternelle and elementary school école élémentaire. Nursery school aims to stimulate the minds of very young children and promote their socialization and development of a basic grasp of language and number. Around the age of 6, children transfer to elementary school, whose primary objectives are learning about writing, arithmetic and citizenship. Secondary education also consists of 2 phases. The first is delivered through colleges college and leads to the National Certificate Diplôme National du Brevet. The second is offered in high schools lycée and finishes in national exams leading to a baccalaureate, available in professional, technical or general flavors or certificate of professional competence certificat d'aptitude professionnelle. Higher education is divided between public universities and the prestigious and selective grandes écoles, such as Sciences Po Paris for political studies, HEC Paris for economics, Polytechnique and the École Nationale Supérieure des Mines de Paris that produce high-profile engineers, or the École Nationale d'Administration for careers in the Grands Corps of the state. The Grandes Écoles have been criticized for alleged elitism. They have produced many if not most of France's high-ranking civil servants, CEOs, and politicians.
Culture.
France has been a center of Western cultural development for centuries. Many French artists have been among the most renowned of their time, and France is still recognized in the world for its rich cultural tradition. The successive political regimes have always promoted artistic creation, and the creation of the Ministry of Culture in 1959 helped preserve the cultural heritage of the country and make it available to the public. The Ministry of Culture has been very active since its creation, granting subsidies to artists, promoting French culture in the world, supporting festivals and cultural events, protecting historical monuments. The French government also succeeded in maintaining a cultural exception to defend audiovisual products made in the country. France receives the highest number of tourists per year, largely thanks to the numerous cultural establishments and historical buildings implanted all over the territory. It counts 1,200 museums welcoming more than 50 million people annually. The most important cultural sites are run by the government, for instance through the public agency Centre des Monuments Nationaux, which is responsible for approximately 85 national historical monuments. The 43,180 buildings protected as historical monuments include mainly residences, many castles and religious buildings, cathedrals, basilicas, churches, but also statues, memorials and gardens. The UNESCO inscribed 41 sites in France on the World Heritage List.
Art.
The origins of French art were very much influenced by Flemish art and by Italian art at the time of the Renaissance. Jean Fouquet, the most famous medieval French painter, is said to have been the first to travel to Italy and experience the early Renaissance at first hand. The Renaissance painting school of Fontainebleau was directly inspired by Italian painters such as Primaticcio and Rosso Fiorentino, who both worked in France. Two of the most famous French artists of the time of Baroque era, Nicolas Poussin and Claude Lorraine, lived in Italy. The 17th century was the period when French painting became prominent and individualized itself through classicism. Louis XI's Prime Minister Jean-Baptiste Colbert founded in 1648 the Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture to protect these artists, and in 1666 he created the still active French Academy in Rome to have direct relations with Italian artists. French artists developed the Rococo style in the 18th century, as a more intimate imitation of old Baroque style. The works of the court endorsed artists Antoine Watt, François Boucher and Jean-Honoré Fragonard being the most representative in the country. The French Revolution brought great changes, as Napoleon favored artists of neoclassic style such as Jacques-Louis David, and the highly influential Académie des Beaux-Arts defined the style known as Academism. At this time France had become a center of artistic creation, the first half of the 19th century being dominated by two successive movements. At first Romanticism with Theodore Géricault and Eugène Delacroix, and Realism with Camille Corot, Gustave Courbet and Jean-François Millet, a style that eventually evolved into naturalism. In the second part of the 19th century, France's influence over painting became even more important, with the development of new styles of painting such as Impressionism and Symbolism. The most famous Impressionist painters of the period were Camille Pissot, Edouard Manet, Edgar Degas, Claude Monet and Auguste Renoir. The second generation of Impressionist-style painters, Paul Cézanne, Paul Gauguin, Toulouse-Lautrec and Georges Seurat, were also at the avant-garde of artistic evolutions, as well as the Fauvist artists Henri Matisse, André Derain and Maurice de Vlaminck. At the beginning of the 20th century, Cubism was developed by Georges Braque and the Spanish painter Pablo Picasso, living in Paris. Other foreign artists also settled and worked in or near Paris, such as Vincent van Gogh, Marc Chagall, Amedeo Modigliani and Wassily Kandinsky. Many museums in France are entirely or partly devoted to sculptures and painting works. A huge collection of old masterpieces created before or during the 18th century are displayed in the state-owned Musée du Louvre, such as Mona Lisa, also known as La Joconde. While the Louvre Palace has been for a long time a museum, the Musée d'Orsay was inaugurated in 1986 in the old railway station Gare d'Orsay, in a major reorganization of national art collections, to gather French paintings from the second part of the 19th century, mainly Impressionism and Fauvism movements. Modern works are presented in the Musée National d'Art Moderne, which moved in 1976 to the Centre Georges Pompidou. These three state-owned museums welcome close to 17 million people a year. Other national museums hosting paintings include the Grand Palais 1.3 million visitors in 2008, but there are also many museums owned by cities, the most visited being the Musée d'Art Moderne de la Ville de Paris 0.8 million entries in 2008. Which hosts contemporary works, and the remains of the Cluniac Abbey. The Gothic architecture, originally named Opus Francignum meaning French work, was born in Ile-de-France and was the first French style of architecture to be copied in all Europe. Northern France is the home of some of the most important Gothic cathedrals and basilicas, the first of these being the Saint Denis Basilica used as the royal necropolis. Other important French Gothic cathedrals are Notre Dame de Chartres and Notre Dame d'Amiens. The kings were crowned in another important Gothic church, Notre Dame de Reims. Aside from churches, Gothic architecture had been used for many religious palaces, the most important one being the Palais des Papes in Avignon. The final victory in the Hundred Years' War marked an important stage in the evolution of French architecture. It was the time of the French Renaissance and several artists from Italy were invited to the French court. Many residential palaces were built in the Loire Valley, from 1450 with as a first reference the Château de Montceau. Such residential castles were the Château de Chambord, the Château de Chenonce, or the Château d'Amboise. Following the Renaissance and the end of the Middle Ages, Baroque architecture replaced the traditional Gothic style. However, in France, Baroque architecture found a greater success in the secular domain than in a religious one. In the secular domain, the Palace of Versailles has many Baroque features. Jules Hardouin in Mansart, who designed the extensions to Versailles, was one of the most influential French architect of the Baroque era. He is famous for his domes les Invalides. Some of the most impressive provincial Baroque architecture is found in places that were not yet French, such as the Place Stanislas in Nancy. On the military architectural side, Vauban designed some of the most efficient fortresses in Europe and became an influential military architect. As a result, imitations of his works can be found all over Europe, the Americas, Russia and Turkey. After the Revolution, the Republicans favored neoclassicism, although it was introduced in France prior to the Revolution, with such buildings as the Parisian Pantheon or the Capitole de Toulouse. Built during the First French Empire, the Arc de Triomphe and Sainte-Marie Madeleine represent the best example of Empire-style architecture. Under Napoleon III, a new wave of urbanism and architecture was given birth. Extravagant buildings such as the neo-Baroque Palais Garnier were built. The urban planning of the time was very organized and rigorous. For example, Haussmann's renovation of Paris. The architecture associated to this era is named Second Empire in English, the term being taken from the Second French Empire. At this time there was a strong Gothic resurgence across Europe and in France. The associated architect was Eugene Viollet-le-Duc. In the late 19th century, Gustave Eiffel designed many bridges, such as Garabit Viaduct, and remains one of the most influential bridge designers of his time, although he is best remembered for the iconic Eiffel Tower. In the 20th century, French-Swiss architect Le Corbusier designed several buildings in France. More recently, French architects have combined both modern and old architectural styles. The Louvre Pyramid is an example of modern architecture added to an older building. The most difficult buildings to integrate within French cities are skyscrapers, as they are visible from afar. For instance, in Paris, since 1977, new buildings had to be under 37 meters 121 feet. France's largest financial district is La Défense, where a significant number of skyscrapers are located. Other massive buildings that are a challenge to integrate into their environment are large bridges. An example of the way this has been done is the Millau Viaduct. Some famous modern French architects include Jean Nouvel, Dominique Perrault, Christian de Portsampac or Paul André.
Literature.
The earliest French literature dates from the Middle Ages, when what is now known as modern France did not have a single, uniform language. There were several languages and dialects, and writers used their own spelling and grammar. Some authors of French medieval texts are unknown, such as Tristan and Iseult and Lancelot Grail. Other authors are known, for example Christian de Troyes and Duke William IX of Aquitaine, who wrote in Occitan. Much medieval French poetry and literature were inspired by the legends of the matter of France, such as the Song of Roland and the various chansons de geste. The Roman Renard, written in 1175 by Père de Saint Cloud, tells the story of the medieval character Renard the Fox and is another example of early French writing. An important 16th century writer was François Rabelais, whose novel Gargantua and Pantagruel has remained famous and appreciated until now. Michel de Montaigne was the other major figure of the French literature during that century. His most famous work, Essays, created the literary genre of the essay. French poetry during that century was embodied by Pierre de Ronsard and Joachim du Bellay. Both writers founded the La Pléiade literary movement. During the 17th century, Madame de Lafayette published anonymously La Princesse de Cleves, a novel that is considered to be one of the very first psychological novels of all times. Jean de La Fontaine is one of the most famous fabulists of that time, as he wrote hundreds of fables, some being far more famous than others, such as The Ant and the Grasshopper. Generations of French pupils had to learn his fables, that were seen as helping teaching wisdom and common sense to the young people. Some of his verses have entered the popular language to become proverbs, such as "A l'oeuvre, on connaît l'artisan, a workman is known by his chips." Jean Racine, whose incredible mastery of the Alexandrine and of the French language has been praised for centuries, created plays such as Phaedra or Britannicus. He is, along with Pierre Corneille Cid and Molière, considered as one of the three great dramatists of France's golden age. Molière, who is deemed to be one of the greatest masters of comedy of the Western literature, wrote dozens of plays, including Le Misanthrope, Le Ver, Le Malade Imaginaire, as well as Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme. His plays have been so popular around the world that French language is sometimes dubbed as the language of Molière, la langue de Molière. Just like English is considered as the language of Shakespeare. French literature and poetry flourished even more in the 18th and 19th centuries. Denis Diderot's best-known works are Jacques the Fatalist and Reims Nephew. He is however best known for being the main redactor of the Encyclopédie, whose aim was to sum up all the knowledge of his century in fields such as arts, sciences, languages, and philosophy and to present them to the people, to fight ignorance and obscurantism. During that same century, Charles Perrault was a prolific writer of famous children's fairy tales including Puss in Boots, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty and Bluebeard. At the start of the 19th century, symbolist poetry was an important movement in French literature, with poets such as Charles Baudelaire, Paul Verlaine and Stéphane Mallarmé. The 19th century saw the writings of many renowned French authors. Victor Hugo is sometimes seen as the greatest French writer of all times for excelling in all literary genres. The preface of his play Cromwell is considered to be the manifesto of the Romantic movement. Les Contemplations and La Légende des Siècles are considered as poetic masterpieces, Hugo's verse having been compared to that of Shakespeare, Dante and Homer. And The Hunchback of Notre Dame has remained immensely popular. Other major authors of that century include Alexandre Dumas' The Three Musketeers and The Count of Monte Cristo, Jules Verne 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Émile Zola Les Rougon Macquart, Honor de Balzac La Comédie Humaine, Guy de Maupassant, Théophile Gautier and Stendhal The Red and the Black. The Charterhouse of Parma, whose works are among the most well-known in France and the world. The Prix Goncourt is a French literary prize first awarded in 1903. Important writers of the 20th century include Marcel Proust, Louis-Ferdinand Céline, Albert Camus, and Jean-Paul Sartre. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry wrote Little Prince, which has remained popular for decades with children and adults around the world. French authors had more literature Nobel Prizes than those of any other nation. The first Nobel Prize in Literature was a French author, while France's latest Nobel Prize in Literature is Patrick Modiano, who was awarded the prize in 2014. His meditations on first philosophy changed the primary object of philosophical thought and raised some of the most fundamental problems for foreigners such as Spinoza, Leibniz, Hume, Berkeley, and Kant. French philosophers produced some of the most important political works of the Age of Enlightenment. In the spirit of the laws, Baron de Montesquieu theorized the principle of separation of powers, which has been implemented in all liberal democracies since it was first applied in the United States. Voltaire came to embody the Enlightenment with his defense of civil liberties, such as the right to a free trial and freedom of religion. 19th century French thought was targeted at responding to the social malaise following the French Revolution. Rationalist philosophers such as Victor Cousin and Auguste Comte, who called for a new social doctrine, were opposed by reactionary thinkers such as Joseph de Maistre, Louis de Bonald and Félicite Robert de Lamennais, who blamed the rationalist rejection of traditional order. De Maistre is considered, together with the Englishman Edmund Burke, one of the founders of European conservatism, while Comte is regarded as the founder of positivism, which Émile Durkheim reformulated as a basis for social research. In the 20th century, partly as a reaction to the perceived excesses of positivism, French spiritualism thrived with thinkers such as Henri Bergson, and it influenced American pragmatism and Whitehead's version of process philosophy. Meanwhile, French epistemology became a prominent school of thought with Jules-Henri Poincare, Gaston Bachelard, Jean Cavès and Jules Villemin. Influenced by German phenomenology and existentialism, the philosophy of Jean-Paul Sartre gained a strong influence after World War II, and late 20th century France became the cradle of postmodern philosophy with Jean-François Lyotard, Jean Baudrillard, Jacques Derrida and Michel Foucault. Music. France has a long and varied musical history. It experienced a golden age in the 17th century thanks to Louis XIV, who employed a number of talented musicians and composers in the royal court. The most renowned composers of this period include Marc-Antoine Charpentier, François Couperin, Michel Richard de Lalande, Jean-Baptiste Lully and Marie Eyes, all of them composers at the court. After the death of the Roi Soul, French musical creation lost dynamism, but in the next century the music of Jean-Philippe Rameau reached some prestige, and today he is still one of the most renowned French composers. Rameau became the dominant composer of French opera and the leading French composer for the harpsichord. French composers played an important role during the music of the 19th and early 20th century, which is considered to be the Romantic music era. Romantic music emphasized a surrender to nature, a fascination with the past and the supernatural, the exploration of unusual, strange and surprising sounds, and a focus on national identity. This period was also a golden age for operas. French composers from the Romantic era included Hector Berlioz, best known for his Symphonie Fantastique, Georges Bizet, best known for Carmen, which has become one of the most popular and frequently performed operas, Gabriel Fauré, best known for his Pavane, Requiem, and Nocturnes, Charles Gounod, best known for his Ave Maria and his opera Faust, Jacques Offenbach, best known for his 100 operettas of the 1850s, 1870s and his uncompleted opera The Tales of Hoffmann, Edouard Lalo, best known for his Symphonie Espagnole for violin and orchestra and his cello concerto in D minor, Jules Massenet, best known for his operas, of which he wrote more than 30. the most frequently staged Armin in 1884 and Werther 1892 and Camille Saint-Saëns. He has many frequently performed works, including The Carnival of the Animals, Danse Macabre, Samson and Delilah Opera, Introduction and Rondo Capriccioso and his Symphony No. 3. Later came precursors of modern classical music. Erik Satie was a key member of the early 20th century Parisian avant-garde, best known for his gymnopédies. Francis Poulenc's best-known works are his piano suite Trois Movements Perpetuels 1919, the Ballet Les Biches 1923, the Concert Trompetre 1928 for harpsichord and orchestra, the Opera Dialogues des Carmelites 1957, and the Gloria 1959 for soprano, choir and orchestra. Maurice Ravel and Claude Debussy are the most prominent figures associated with Impressionist music. Debussy was among the most influential composers of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and his use of non-traditional scales and chromaticism influenced many composers who followed. Debussy's music is noted for its sensory content and frequent usage of atonality. The two composers invented new musical forms and new sounds. Ravel's piano compositions, such as Jeux, Miroirs, Les Tombes de Couperin and Gaspard de la Nuit, demand considerable virtuosity. His mastery of orchestration is evident in the Rhapsody Espagnole, Daphnis et Chloe, his arrangement of Modest Mussorgsky's pictures at an exhibition and his orchestral work Bolero 1928. More recently, the middle of the 20th century, Maurice Ohana, Pierre Schaeffer and Pierre Boulez contributed to the evolutions of contemporary classical music. French music then followed the rapid emergence of pop and rock music at the middle of the 20th century. Although English-speaking creations achieved popularity in the country, French pop music, known as chanson française, has also remained very popular. Among the most important French artists of the century are Edith Piaf, Georges Brassens, Leo Ferré, Charles Aznavour and Serge Gainsbourg. Although there are very few rock bands in France compared to English-speaking countries, bands such as Noir Désir, Mano Negra, Niagara, Les Rita Mitsuko and more recently Superbus, Phoenix and Gojira, or Chaka Ponk, have reached worldwide popularity. Other French artists with international careers have been popular in several countries, most notably female singers Dalida, Myrtle Math, Mylène Farmer, electronic music pioneers Jean-Michel Jarre, Laurent Garnier and Bob Sinclair, later Martin Solveig and David Guetta. In the 1990s and 2000s decade, electronic duos Daft Punk, Justice and Air also reached worldwide popularity and contributed to the reputation of modern electronic music in the world. Among current musical events and institutions in France, many are dedicated to classical music and operas. The most prestigious institutions are the state-owned Paris National Opera with its two sites Ballet Garnier and Opera Bastille, the Opéra National de Lyon, the Théâtre du Châtelet in Paris, the Théâtre du Capitole in Toulouse and the Grand Théâtre de Bordeaux. As for music festivals, there are several events organized, the most popular being Eurokine, a wordplay which sounds in French as European, Celades and Rock en Seine. The Fête de la Musique, imitated by many foreign cities, was first launched by the French government in 1982. Major music halls and venues in France include Les Zénith sites present in many cities and other places in Paris, Paris Olympia, Théâtre Mogador, Élysée Montmartre.
Cinema.
France has historical and strong links with cinema, with two Frenchmen, Auguste and Louis Lumière, known as the Lumière brothers, credited with creating cinema in 1895. The world's first female filmmaker, Alice Guy Black, was also from France. Several important cinematic movements, including the late 1950s and 1960s Nouvelle Vague, began in the country. It is noted for having a strong film industry, due in part to protections afforded by the government of France. France remains a leader in filmmaking, producing more films than any other European country. The nation also hosts the Cannes Festival, one of the most important and famous film festivals in the world. Apart from its strong and innovative film tradition, France has also been a gathering spot for artists from across Europe and the world. For this reason, French cinema is sometimes intertwined with the cinema of foreign nations. Directors from nations such as Poland, Roman Polanski, Krzysztof Kieślowski, Andrzej Zulawski, Argentina Gaspano, Edgardo Kozarinski, Russia Alexander Alexiev, Anatole Litvak, Austria Michael Haneke and Georgia Jala Babliani, Ottavio Celiani are prominent in the ranks of French cinema. Conversely, French directors have had prolific and influential careers in other countries, such as Luc Besson, Jacques Tourneur or Francis Weber in the United States. Although the French film market is dominated by Hollywood, France is the only nation in the world where American films make up the smallest share of total film revenues, at 50%, compared with 77% in Germany and 69% in Japan. French films account for 35% of the total film revenues of France, which is the highest percentage of national film revenues in the developed world outside the United States, compared to 14% in Spain and 8% in the UK. Until recently, France had for centuries been the cultural center of the world. The nation succeeded in convincing all EU members to refuse to include culture and audiovisuals in the list of liberalized sectors of the WTO in 1993. Moreover, this decision was confirmed in a voting in the UNESCO in 2005. The principle of cultural exception won an overwhelming victory with 198 countries voting for it and only 2 countries, the United States and Israel, voting against.
Fashion.
Fashion has been an important industry and cultural export of France since the 17th century, and modern haute couture originated in Paris in the 1860s. Today, Paris, along with London, Milan, and New York City, is considered one of the world's fashion capitals, and the city is home or headquarters to many of the premier fashion houses. The expression haute couture is, in France, a legally protected name, guaranteeing certain quality standards. The association of France with fashion and style dates largely to the reign of Louis XIV, when the luxury goods industries in France came increasingly under royal control and the French royal court became, arguably, the arbiter of taste and style in Europe. But France renewed its dominance of the high fashion industry in the years 1860 to 1960 through the establishing of the great couturier houses such as Chanel, Dior, and Givenchy. The French perfume industry is world leader in its sector and is centered on the town of Grasse. In the 1960s, the elitist haute couture came under criticism from France's youth culture. In 1966, the designer Yves Saint Laurent broke with established haute couture norms by launching a pret-a-porter ready-to-wear line and expanding French fashion into mass manufacturing. With a greater focus on marketing and manufacturing, new trends were established by Sonia Rykiel, Thierry Mugler, Claude Montana, Jean-Paul Gaultier and Christian Lacroix in the 1970s and 1980s. The 1990s saw a conglomeration of many French couture houses under luxury giants and multinationals such as LVMH.
Media.
Best-selling daily national newspapers in France are Le Parisien or Aujourd'hui en France with 460,000 sold daily, Le Monde and Le Figaro, with around 300,000 copies sold daily, but also L'Equipe, dedicated to sports coverage. In the past years, free dailies made a breakthrough, with Metro, 20 Minutes and Direct Plus distributed at more than 650,000 copies respectively. However, the widest circulations are reached by regional daily Ouest France with more than 750,000 copies sold, and the 50 other regional papers have also high sales. The sector of weekly magazines is stronger and diversified with more than 400 specialized weekly magazines published in the country. The most influential news magazines are the left-wing Le Nouvel Observateur, centrist L'Express and right-wing Le Point, more than 400,000 copies, but the highest circulation for weeklies is reached by TV magazines and by women's magazines, among them Marie Claire and Elle, which have foreign versions. Influential weeklies also include investigative and satirical papers Le Canard and Chain and Charlie Hebdo, as well as Paris Match. Like in most industrialized nations, the print media have been affected by a severe crisis in the past decade. In 2008, the government launched a major initiative to help the sector reform and become financially independent, but in 2009 it had to give €600,000 to help the print media cope with the economic crisis, in addition to existing subsidies. In 1974, after years of centralized monopoly on radio and television, the governmental agency ORTF was split into several national institutions, but the 3 already existing TV channels and 4 national radio stations remained under state control. It was only in 1981 that the government allowed free broadcasting in the territory, ending state monopoly on radio. The Nation Brand Index of 2008 suggested that France has the second best international reputation, only behind Germany. A global opinion poll for the BBC saw France ranked the 4th most positively viewed nation in the world behind Germany, Canada and the United Kingdom in 2014. According to a poll in 2011, the French were found to have the highest level of religious tolerance and to be the country where the highest proportion of the population defines its identity primarily in terms of nationality and not religion. 75% of French had a favorable view of the United States, making France one of the most pro-American countries in the world. The favorable view of the United States had dropped to 46%. In January 2010, the magazine International Living ranked France as best country to live in, ahead of 193 other countries, for the 5th year running. The French Revolution continues to permeate the country's collective memory. The tricolour flag of France, the anthem La Marseillaise, and the motto Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité, defined in Title I of the Constitution as national symbols, all emerged during the cultural ferment of the early revolution, along with Marianne, a common national personification. In addition, Bastille Day, the national holiday, commemorates the storming of the Bastille on the 14th of July 1789. A common and traditional symbol of the French people is the Gallic rooster. Its origins date back to antiquity, since the Latin word Gallus meant both rooster and inhabitant of Gaul. Then this figure gradually became the most widely shared representation of the French, used by French monarchs, then by the Revolution and under the successive republican regimes as representation of the national identity, used for some stamps and coins. France is one of the world leaders of gender equality in the workplace. As of 2017, it has 36.8% of its corporate board seats held by women, which makes it the leader of the G20 for that metric, and was ranked in 2019 by the World Bank as one of the only 6 countries in the world where women have the same work rights as men. France is one of the most liberal countries in the world when it comes to LGBT rights. A 2013 Pew Research Center poll found that 77% of the French think that same-sex relationships should be accepted by society, one of the highest acceptance rates in the world comparable to that of other Western European nations. France legalized same-sex marriage and adoption in 2013. The government has used its diplomatic clout to support LGBT rights throughout the world, notably in the United Nations. France is also committed to protecting the environment. In 2018, France was ranked 2nd in the Environmental Performance Index behind neighboring Switzerland, out of 180 countries ranked by Yale University in that study. Being the host country of the 2015 Paris Climate Change Conference, the French government was instrumental in securing the 2015 Paris Agreement, a success that has been credited to its openness and experience in diplomacy, though the U.S., after the election of President Trump in 2016, then announced it will withdraw from the agreement.
Cuisine.
French cuisine is renowned for being one of the finest in the world. According to the regions, traditional recipes are different. The north of the country prefers to use butter as the preferred fat for cooking, whereas olive oil is more commonly used in the south. Moreover, each region of France has iconic traditional specialities: cassoulet in the southwest, choucroute in Alsace, quiche in the Lorraine region, beef bourguignon in the Bourgogne, Provençal tapenade, etc. France's most renowned products are wines, including Champagne, Bordeaux, Bourgogne, and Beaujolais, as well as a large variety of different cheeses, such as Camembert, Roquefort and Brie. There are more than 400 different varieties. A meal often consists of 3 courses, hors d'oeuvre or entree introductory course, sometimes soup, plat principal main course, fromage cheese course and or dessert, sometimes with a salad offered before the cheese or dessert. Hors d'oeuvres could include trine de saumon au basilic, lobster bisque, foie gras, French onion soup or a croque monsieur. The plat principal could include a pot au feu or steak frites. The dessert could be mille-fil pastry, a macaron, un éclair, crème brûlée, mousse au chocolat, crepes, or café liégeois. French cuisine is also regarded as a key element of the quality of life and the attractiveness of France. The acquisition or loss of a star can have dramatic effects on the success of a restaurant. By 2006, the Michelin Guide had awarded 620 stars to French restaurants. At that time, more than any other country. Although the guide also inspects more restaurants in France than in any other country. By 2010, Japan was awarded as many Michelin stars as France, despite having half the number of Michelin inspectors working there. In addition to its wine tradition, France is also a major producer of beer and rum. The 3 main French brewing regions are Alsace 60% of national production, Nord-Pas-de-Calais and Lorraine. France produces rum via distilleries located on islands such as Reunion Island in the southern Indian Ocean.
Sports.
France hosts the world's biggest annual sporting event, the Tour de France, and other popular sports played in France to include football, judo, tennis, rugby and pétanque. France has hosted events such as the 1938 and 1998 FIFA World Cups, the 2007 Rugby World Cup, and will host the 2023 Rugby World Cup. The country also hosted the 1960 European Nations Cup, UEFA Euro 1984, UEFA Euro 2016 and 2019 FIFA Women's World Cup. The Stade de France in Saint-Denis is France's largest stadium and was the venue for the 1998 FIFA World Cup and 2007 Rugby World Cup finals. Since 1903, France is famous for its 24 hours of Le Mans sports car endurance race. Several major tennis tournaments take place in France, including the Paris Masters and the French Open, one of the 4 Grand Slam tournaments. French martial arts include savet and fencing. France has a close association with the modern Olympic Games. It was a French aristocrat, Baron Pierre de Coubertin, who suggested the Games' revival, at the end of the 19th century. After Athens was awarded the first Games, in reference to the Olympics' Greek origins, Paris hosted the second Games in 1900. Paris was the first home of the International Olympic Committee, before it moved to Lausanne. Since 1900, France has hosted the Olympics on 4 further occasions: the 1924 Summer Olympics, again in Paris. Both the national football team and the national rugby union team are nicknamed Lablius in reference to the team's shirt color, as well as the national French tricolor flag. Football is the most popular sport in France, with over 1,800,000 registered players, and over 18,000 registered clubs. The football team is among the most successful in the world, with 2 FIFA World Cup victories in 1998 and 2018, 1 FIFA World Cup second place in 2006, and 2 UEFA European Championships in 1984 and 2000. The top national football club competition is Ligue 1. France has produced some of the greatest players in the world, including 3-time FIFA World Player of the Year Zinedine Zidane, 3-time Ballon d'Or recipient Michel Platini, record holder for most goals scored at a World Cup Just Fontaine, first football player to receive the Legion d'Honneur Raymond Kopa, and the record goal scorer for the French national team Thierry Henry. The French Open, also called Roland Garros, is a major tennis tournament held over 2 weeks between late May and early June at the Stade Roland-Garros in Paris. It is the premier clay court tennis championship event in the world and the second of 4 annual Grand Slam tournaments. Rugby union is popular, particularly in Paris and the southwest of France. The national rugby union team has competed at every Rugby World Cup, and takes part in the annual Six Nations Championship. Stemming from a strong domestic league, the French rugby team has won 16 Six Nations Championships, including 8 Grand Slams, and has reached the semi-final of the Rugby World Cup 6 times, going on to the final 3 times. Rugby league in France is mostly played and followed in the south of France, in cities such as Perpignan and Toulouse. The Catalans Dragons and Toulouse Olympique are the most notable clubs currently playing in the Super League, and the RFL Championship is the top-tier rugby league competitions in Europe. The Elite One Championship is the professional competition for rugby league clubs in France. Judo is an important sport in France. It is the second country, after Japan, to have the most gold medals. Teddy Riner has won 10 World Championships gold medals, the first and only judoka to do so, and David Douillet has won 4, making them respectively the first and third top judokas in the world in terms of gold medals. In recent decades, France has produced world elite basketball players, most notably Tony Parker. The French national basketball team won gold at the FIBA Eurobasket 2013. The national team has won 2 Olympic silver medals, in 2019 48. Background:
France today is one of the most modern countries in the world and is a leader among European nations. It plays an influential global role as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, NATO, the G7, the G20, the EU, and other multilateral organizations. France rejoined NATO's integrated military command structure in 2009, reversing de Gaulle's 1966 decision to withdraw French forces from NATO. Since 1958, it has constructed a hybrid presidential parliamentary governing system resistant to the instabilities experienced in earlier, more purely parliamentary administrations. In recent decades, its reconciliation and cooperation with Germany have proved central to the economic integration of Europe, including the introduction of a common currency, the euro, in January 1999. In the early 21st century, 5 French overseas entities, French Guiana, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Mayotte, and Réunion, became French regions and were made part of France proper.
Geography:
France.
Location:
Metropolitan France.
Western Europe, bordering the Bay of Biscay and English Channel, between Belgium and Spain. Southeast of the UK, bordering the Mediterranean Sea, between Italy and Spain.
French Guiana.
Northern South America, bordering the North Atlantic Ocean, between Brazil and Suriname.
Guadeloupe.
Caribbean, islands between the Caribbean Sea and the North Atlantic Ocean, southeast of Puerto Rico.
Martinique.
Caribbean, island between the Caribbean Sea and North Atlantic Ocean, north of Trinidad and Tobago.
Mayotte.
Southern Indian Ocean, island in the Mozambique Channel, about halfway between northern Madagascar and northern Mozambique.
Réunion.
Southern Africa, island in the Indian Ocean, east of Madagascar.
Geographic coordinates:
Metropolitan France,
4600 N, 200 E.
French Guiana,
400 N, 5300 W.
Guadeloupe,
1615 N, 6135 W.
Martinique,
1440 N, 6100 W.
Mayotte,
1250 S, 4510 E.
Réunion,
2106 S, 5536 E.
Map references:
Metropolitan France,
Europe,
French Guiana,
South America,
Guadeloupe,
Central America and the Caribbean,
Martinique,
Central America and the Caribbean,
Mayotte,
Africa,
Réunion.
World.
Area:
Total:
643,801 square kilometers.
Land:
640,427 square kilometers.
Water:
3,374 square kilometers.
551,500 square kilometers. Metropolitan France 549,970 square kilometers. Metropolitan France 1,530 square kilometers. Metropolitan France.
Note:
The first numbers include the overseas regions of French Guiana, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Mayotte, and Reunion.
Country comparison to the world.
44.
Area comparative.
Slightly more than 4 times the size of Georgia, slightly less than the size of Texas.
Area comparison map.
Area comparison map.
Land boundaries.
Border countries, 8.
And or 55 kilometers. Belgium 556 kilometers, Germany 418 kilometers, Italy 476 kilometers, Luxembourg 69 kilometers, Monaco 6 kilometers, Spain 646 kilometers, Switzerland 525 kilometers.
Metropolitan France, total
2,751.
French Guiana, total
1,205.
Coastline
4,853 kilometers.
Metropolitan France
3,427 kilometers.
Maritime claims
Territorial sea
12 nanometers.
Exclusive economic zone
200 nanometers, does not apply to the Mediterranean Sea.
Contiguous zone
24 nanometers.
Continental shelf
200 meter depth or to the depth of exploitation.
Climate
Metropolitan France
generally cool winters and mild summers, but mild winters and hot summers along the Mediterranean. Occasional strong, cold, dry, north to northwesterly wind known as the Mistral.
French Guiana
Tropical, hot, humid, little seasonal temperature variation.
Guadeloupe and Martinique
Subtropical tempered by trade winds. Moderately high humidity, rainy season, June to October. Vulnerable to devastating cyclones, hurricanes, every 8 years on average.
Mayotte
Tropical, marine, hot, humid, rainy season during northeastern monsoon, November to May. Dry season is cooler, May to November.
Reunion
Tropical, but temperature moderates with elevation, cool and dry, May to November. Hot and rainy, November to April.
Terrain
Metropolitan France
mostly flat plains or gently rolling hills in north and west. Remainder is mountainous, especially Pyrenees in south, Alps in east.
French Guiana
Low-lying coastal plains rising to hills and small mountains.
Guadeloupe
Bastes volcanic in origin with interior mountains. Grantes low limestone formation. Most of the 7 other islands are volcanic in origin.
Martinique
Mountainous with indented coastline. Dormant volcano.
Mayotte
Generally undulating, with deep ravines and ancient volcanic peaks.
Reunion
Mostly rugged and mountainous, fertile lowlands along coast.
Elevation
Mean elevation
375 m.
Lowest point.
Rhone River Delta -2 m.
Highest point.
Mont Blanc 4,810.
Note:
To assess the possible effects of climate change on the ice and snow cap of Mont Blanc, its surface and peak have been extensively measured in recent years. These new peak measurements have exceeded the traditional height of 4,807 m and have varied between 4,808 m and 4,811 m. The actual rock summit is 4,792 m and is 40 m away from the ice-covered summit.
Natural resources.
Metropolitan France: coal, iron ore, bauxite, zinc, uranium, antimony, arsenic, potash, feldspar, fluorspar, gypsum, timber, arable land, fish, French Guiana, gold deposits, petroleum, kaolin, niobium, tantalum, clay.
Land use.
Agricultural land
52.7%.
Arable land
33.4%. Permanent crops
1.8%. Permanent pasture
17.5%.
Forest
29.2%.
Other
18.1%.
Irrigated land
26,420 square kilometers. 26,950 square kilometers.
Metropolitan France
26,000 square kilometers.
Population distribution.
Much of the population is concentrated in the north and southeast. Although there are many urban agglomerations throughout the country, Paris is by far the largest city, with Lyon ranked a distant second.
Natural hazards.
Metropolitan France.
Flooding, avalanches, midwinter windstorms, drought, Forest fires in south near the Mediterranean.
Overseas departments.
Hurricanes, cyclones, flooding.
Volcanism.
Montaigne Pelly, 1,394 m. On the island of Martinique in the Caribbean is the most active volcano of the Lesser Antilles arc. It last erupted in 1932. A catastrophic eruption in May 1902 destroyed the city of St. Pierre, killing an estimated 30,000 people. La Soufriere, 1,467 m. On the island of Guadeloupe in the Caribbean last erupted from July 1976 to March 1977. These volcanoes are part of the volcanic island arc of the Lesser Antilles that extends from Saba in the north to Grenada in the south.
Environment, current issues.
Some forest damage from acid rain, air pollution from industrial and vehicle emissions, water pollution from urban wastes, agricultural runoff.
Environment, international agreements.
Party to
air pollution nitrogen oxides, air pollution persistent organic pollutants, air pollution sulfur 85, air pollution sulfur 94, air pollution volatile organic compounds, Antarctic Environmental Protocol, Antarctic Marine Living Resources, Antarctic Seals, Antarctic Treaty, Biodiversity, Climate Change Kyoto Protocol, Desertification, Endangered Species, Hazardous Wastes, Law of the Sea, Marine Dumping, Marine Life Conservation, Ozone Layer Protection, Ship Pollution, Tropical Timber 83, Tropical Timber 94, Wetlands, Whaling.
Signed, but not ratified.
None of the selected agreements.
Geography note.
Largest West European nation, most major French rivers, the Meuse, Seine, Loire, Charente, Dordogne, and Garonne, flown northward or westward into the Atlantic Ocean. Only the Rhône flows southward into the Mediterranean Sea.
People and society.
France.
Population.
67,364,357.
Note.
The above figure is for metropolitan France and 5 overseas regions. The metropolitan France population is 62,814,233.
Country comparison to the world.
21.
Nationality.
Noun.
Frenchman, men, Frenchwoman, women.
Adjective.
French.
Ethnic groups.
Celtic and Latin with Teutonic, Slavic, North African, Indo-Chinese, Basque minorities.
Note.
Overseas departments.
Black, white, mulatto, East Indian, Chinese, Amerindian.
Languages.
French, official 100%, declining regional dialects and languages, Provençal, Breton, Alsatian, Corsican, Catalan, Basque, Flemish, Occitan, Picard.
Note.
Overseas departments.
French, Creole Patois, Mahourian, a Swahili dialect.
Religions.
Christian, overwhelmingly Roman Catholic, 63 to 66%, Muslim 7 to 9%, Buddhist 0.5 to 0.75%, Jewish 0.5 to 0.75%, other 0.5 to 1.0%, non-23 to 28%.
Note.
France maintains a tradition of secularism and has not officially collected data on religious affiliation since the 1872 national census, which complicates assessments of France's religious composition, and 1872 law prohibiting state authorities from collecting data on individuals' ethnicity or religious beliefs was reaffirmed by a 1978 law emphasizing the prohibition of the collection or exploitation of personal data revealing an individual's race, ethnicity, or political, philosophical, or religious opinions. A 1905 law codified France's separation of church and state.
Age structure.
0 to 14 years.
18.48%, male 6,366,789, female 6,082,729.
15 to 24 years.
11.8%, male 4,065,780, female 3,884,488.
25 to 54 years.
37.48%, male 12,731,825, Female 12,515,501.
55 to 64 years.
12.42%. Male 4,035,073. Female 4,331,751.
65 years and over.
19.82%. Male 5,781,410. Female 7,569,011.
Population pyramid.
Population pyramid.
Dependency ratios. Dependency ratios are a measure of the age structure of a population. They relate the number of individuals that are likely to be economically dependent on the support of others. Dependency ratios contrast the ratio of youths, ages 0 to 14, and the elderly, ages 65 plus, to the number of those in the working age group, ages 15 to 64. Changes in the dependency ratio provide an indication of potential social support requirements resulting from changes in population age structures, as fertility leave. More dependency ratios field listing.
Total dependency ratio
59.2.
Youth dependency ratio
29.1.
Elderly dependency ratio
30.2.
Potential support ratio
3.3.
Median age
Total
41.5 years.
Male
39.7 years.
Female
43.2 years.
Country comparison to the world.
40.
Population growth rate: the average annual percent change in the population, resulting from a surplus, or deficit, of births over deaths and the balance of migrants entering and leaving a country. The rate may be positive or negative. The growth rate is a factor in determining how great a burden would be imposed on a country by the changing needs of its people for infrastructure, e.g., schools, hospitals, housing, roads, resources, e.g., food, water, electricity, and jobs. Rapid population growth can be seen as more population growth rate field listing.
0.37%.
Country comparison to the world.
166.
Birth rate.
12.1 births out of 1,000 population.
Country comparison to the world.
162.
Death rate.
9.4 deaths out of 1,000 population.
Country comparison to the world.
51.
Net migration rate.
1.1 migrants out of 1,000 population.
Country comparison to the world.
60.
Population distribution.
Much of the population is concentrated in the north and southeast. Although there are many urban agglomerations throughout the country, Paris is by far the largest city, with Lyon ranked a distant second.
Urbanization.
Urban population.
80.7% of total population, 2019.
Rate of urbanization.
0.72% annual rate of change.
Major urban areas. Population.
10.958 million Paris, capital. 1.705 million Lyon. 1.603 million Marseille, Aix-en-Provence. 1.058 million Lille. 1.011 million Toulouse. 957,000 Bordeaux, 2019.
Sex ratio.
At birth.
1.05 male every 1 female.
0 to 14 years.
1.05 male every 1 female.
15 to 24 years.
1.05 male every 1 female.
25 to 54 years.
1.02 male every 1 female.
55 to 64 years.
0.93 male every 1 female.
65 years and over.
0.76 male every 1 female.
Total population.
0.96 male every 1 female.
Mother's mean age at first birth.
28.1 years.
Maternal mortality rate: the maternal mortality rate, MMR, is the annual number of female deaths per 100,000 live births from any cause related to or aggravated by pregnancy or its management, excluding accidental or incidental causes. The MMR includes deaths during pregnancy, childbirth, or within 42 days of termination of pregnancy, irrespective of the duration and site of the pregnancy, for a specified year. Maternal mortality rate field listing.
8 deaths/100,000 live births.
Country comparison to the world.
151.
Infant mortality rate.
Total.
3.2 deaths out of 1,000 live births.
Male.
3.5 deaths out of 1,000 live births.
Female.
2.9 deaths out of 1,000 live births.
Country comparison to the world.
209.
Life expectancy at birth.
Total population.
82 years.
Male.
78.9 years.
Female.
85.3 years.
Country comparison to the world.
19.
Total fertility rate.
2.06 children born. Woman.
Country comparison to the world.
106.
Contraceptive prevalence rate. This field gives the percent of women of reproductive age, 15 to 49, who are married or in union and are using, or whose sexual partner is using, a method of contraception according to the date of the most recent available data. The contraceptive prevalence rate is an indicator of health services, development, and women's empowerment. It is also useful in understanding past, present, and future fertility trends, especially in developing countries. Contraceptive prevalence rate field listing.
78.4%, 2010-11.
Drinking water source.
Improved.
Urban.
100% of population.
Rural.
100% of population.
Total.
100% of population.
Unimproved.
Urban.
0% of population.
Rural.
0% of population.
Total.
0% of population.
Current health expenditure. Current health expenditure, CHE, describes the share of spending on health in each country relative to the size of its economy. It includes expenditures corresponding to the final consumption of healthcare goods and services and excludes investment, exports, and intermediate consumption. CHE shows the importance of the health sector in the economy and indicates the priority given to health in monetary terms. Note:
Current health expenditure replaces the former health expenditures field. More current health expenditure field listing.
11.5%.
Physicians density.
3.23 physicians out of 1,000 population.
Hospital bed density.
6.5 beds out of 1,000 population.
Sanitation facility access.
Improved.
Urban.
98.6% of population.
Rural.
98.9% of population.
Total.
98.7% of population.
Unimproved.
Urban.
1.4% of population.
Rural.
1.1% of population.
Total.
1.3% of population.
HIV/AIDS, adult prevalence rate.
0.3%.
Country comparison to the world.
87.
HIV/AIDS, people living with HIV/AIDS.
180,000.
Country comparison to the world.
31.
HIV/AIDS, deaths.
Less than 500. Obesity. Adult prevalence rate. 21.6%. Country comparison to the world. 87. Education expenditures. 5.5% of GDP. Country comparison to the world. 43. School life expectancy. Primary to tertiary education. School life expectancy, SLE, is the total number of years of schooling, primary to tertiary, that a child can expect to receive, assuming that the probability of his or her being enrolled in school at any particular future age is equal to the current enrollment ratio at that age. Caution must be maintained when utilizing this indicator in international comparisons. For example, a year or grade completed in one country is not necessarily the same in terms of educational content or quality. More school life expectancy, primary to tertiary education, field listing. Total.
15 years.
Male.
15 years.
Female.
16 years.
Unemployment, youth ages 15 to 24.
Total.
22.3%.
Male.
23.1%.
Female.
21.3%.
Country comparison to the world.
60.
Government.
France.
Country name.
Conventional long form.
French Republic.
Conventional short form.
France.
Local long form.
République française.
Local short form.
France.
Etymology.
Name derives from the Latin Francia meaning land of the Franks. The Franks were a group of Germanic tribes located along the Middle and Lower Rhine River in the 3rd century AD who merged with Gallic Roman populations in succeeding centuries and to whom they passed on their name.
Government type.
Semi-presidential republic.
Capital.
Name.
Paris.
Geographic coordinates.
4852 N, 220 E.
Time difference.
UTC +1, 6 hours ahead of Washington, D.C., during standard time.
Daylight saving time.
+1, begins last Sunday in March, ends last Sunday in October.
Note.
Applies to metropolitan France only. For its overseas regions the time difference is UTC4 for Guadeloupe and Martinique, UTC3 for French Guiana, UTC +3 for Mayotte, and UTC +4 for Reunion.
Etymology.
Name derives from the Parisii, a Celtic tribe that inhabited the area from the 3rd century BC, but who were conquered by the Romans in the 1st century BC. The Celtic settlement became the Roman town of Lucia Parisiorum, Lucia of the Parisii. Over subsequent centuries it became Parisium and then just Paris. Administrative divisions.
18 regions. Regions, singular, region. Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes, Bourgogne-Franche-Comté, Burgundy-Free County, Brittany, Brittany, Centre-Val de Loire, Centre-Loire Valley, Corse, Corsica, Grand Est, Grand East, Guadeloupe, Guyane, French Guiana, Haute-de-France, Upper France, Île-de-France, Martinique, Mayotte, Normandy, Normandy, Nouvelle-Aquitaine, New Aquitaine, Occitanie, Occitania, Pays de la Loire, Lands of the Loire, Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur, Reunion.
Note.
France is divided into 13 metropolitan regions, including the collectivity of Corse or Corsica, and 5 overseas regions, French Guiana, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Mayotte, and Reunion, and is subdivided into 96 metropolitan departments and 5 overseas departments, which are the same as the overseas regions.
Dependent areas.
Clipperton Island, French Polynesia, French Southern and Antarctic lands, New Caledonia, St. Barthélemy, St. Martin, St. Pierre and Miquelon, Wallis and Futuna.
Note.
The U.S. government does not recognize claims to Antarctica. New Caledonia has been considered a sui generis collectivity of France since 1998, a unique status falling between that of an independent country and a French overseas department.
Independence: for most countries, this entry gives the date that sovereignty was achieved and from which nation, empire, or trusteeship. For the other countries, the date given may not represent independence in the strict sense, but rather some significant nationhood event such as the traditional founding date or the date of unification, federation, confederation, establishment, fundamental change in the form of government, or state succession. For a number of countries, the establishment of statehood. Morai Independence Field Listing.
No official date of independence.
486. Frankish tribes unified under Merovingian kingship. The 10th of August 843. Western Francia established from the division of the Carolingian Empire. The 14th of July 1789. French monarchy overthrown. The 22nd of September 1792. First French Republic founded. The 4th of October 1958. Fifth French Republic established.
National holiday.
Fête de la Fédération. The 14th of July 1790. Note: although often incorrectly referred to as Bastille Day, the celebration actually commemorates the holiday held on the first anniversary of the storming of the Bastille, on the 14th of July 1789, and the establishment of a constitutional monarchy. Other names for the holiday are Fête Nationale, national holiday, and 14 Juillet, 14th of July.
Constitution.
History.
Many previous, latest effective the 4th of October 1958.
Amendments.
Proposed by the President of the Republic, upon recommendation of the Prime Minister and Parliament, or by Parliament. Proposals submitted by Parliament members require passage by both houses followed by approval in a referendum. Passage of proposals submitted by the government can bypass a referendum if submitted by the President to Parliament and passed by at least 3/5 majority vote by Parliament's National Assembly. Amended many times, last in 2008. Note: in May 2018, the Prime Minister submitted a bill to the National Assembly to amend several provisions of the Constitution.
Legal system.
Civil law, review of administrative but not legislative acts.
International law organization participation.
has not submitted an ICJ jurisdiction declaration, except sick jurisdiction.
Citizenship.
Citizenship by birth.
No.
Citizenship by descent only.
At least one parent must be a citizen of France.
Dual citizenship recognized.
Yes.
Residency requirement for naturalization.
5 years.
Suffrage.
18 years of age. Universal.
Executive branch.
Chief of State.
President Emmanuel Macron, since the 14th of May 2017.
Head of Government.
Prime Minister Edouard Philippe, since the 15th of May 2017.
Cabinet.
Council of Ministers appointed by the President at the suggestion of the Prime Minister.
Elections/appointments.
President directly elected by absolute majority popular vote in 2 rounds if needed for a 5-year term. Eligible for a second term. Election last held on 23 April with a runoff on the 7th of May 2017. Next to be held in April 2022. Prime Minister appointed by the President.
Election results.
Emmanuel Macron elected President in second round, percent of vote in first round. Emmanuel Macron, M, 24%, Marine Le Pen, FN 21.3%, François Fillon, LR, 20%, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, FI 19.6%, Benoît Hamon, PS 6.4%, other 8.7%, percent of vote in second round, Macron 66.1%, Le Pen 33.9%.
Legislative branch.
Description.
Bicameral parliament or parliament consists of
Senate or Senat, 348 seats, 328 for metropolitan France and overseas departments and regions of Guadeloupe, Martinique, French Guiana, Réunion, and Mayotte, 2 for New Caledonia, 2 for French Polynesia, 1 for Saint Pierre and Miquelon, 1 for Saint Barthélemy, 1 for Saint Martin, 1 for Wallis and Futuna, and 12 for French nationals abroad. Members indirectly elected by departmental electoral colleges using absolute majority vote in 2 rounds if needed for departments with 1-3 members and proportional representation vote in departments with 4 or more members. Members serve 6-year terms with 1/2 of the membership renewed every 3 years.
National Assembly or Assembly Nationale, 577 seats minus 556 for metropolitan France, 10 for overseas departments, and 11 for citizens abroad. Members directly elected by absolute majority vote in 2 rounds if needed to serve 5-year terms.
Elections.
Senate, last held on the 24th of September 2017. Next to be held on the 24th of September 2020.
National Assembly, last held on 11 and the 18th of June 2017, next to be held in June 2022.
Election results.
Senate, percent of vote by party, NA, seats by political caucus, party or group of parties, LR 144, PS 73, UK 51. REM 23, RDSC 22, CRCE 16, RTLI 13, other 6, composition, men 246, women 102, percent of women 29.3%.
National Assembly, percent of vote by party first round, REM 28.2%, LO 15.8%, FN 13.2%, FI 11%, PS 7.4%, other 24.4%, percent of vote by party second round, LOREM 43.1%, LO 22.2%, FN 8.8%, Modem 6.1%, PS 5.7%, FI 4.9%, other 9.2%, seats by political caucus, party or group of parties, LOREM 306, LO 104, Modem 46, UDI/AGIA 29, PS 29, UD 18, FI 17, Liberties and Territories 16, C 16, other 14, composition, men 349, women 228, percent of women 39.5%. Note, total parliament percent of women 35.7%.
Judicial branch.
Highest courts.
Court of Cassation or Cour de Cassation, consists of the court president, 6 divisional presiding judges, 120 trial judges, and 70 deputy judges organized into 6 divisions, 3 civil, 1 commercial, 1 labor, and 1 criminal. Constitutional Council consists of 9 members.
Judge selection in term of office.
Court of Cassation judges appointed by the President of the Republic from nominations from the High Council of the Judiciary, presided over by the Court of Cassation and 15 appointed members. Judges appointed for life. Constitutional Council members, 3 appointed by the President of the Republic and 3 each by the National Assembly and Senate Presidents. Members serve 9-year, non-renewable terms with 1/3 of the membership renewed every 3 years.
Subordinate courts.
Appellate courts or cour d'appel, regional courts or tribunal de grande instance, first instance courts or tribunal d'instance, administrative courts.
Note:
in April 2018, the French government announced its intention to reform the country's judicial system.
Political parties and leaders.
Presidential majority parties: Edouard Philippe,
La République En Marche, or REM, Richard Ferrand.
Democratic Movement or MoDem, François Bayrou.
Movement of Progressives or MDP, Robert Hue.
Parliamentary Right Parties, François Baron.
The Republicans or LR, Annie Genevard.
Union of Democrats and Independents or UD, Jean-Christophe Cambadélis.
Hunting, Fishing, Nature and Tradition or CPNT, Eddie Payayan. Parliamentary Left Parties, Bernard Cazeneuve.
Socialist Party or BS, Jean-Christophe Cambadélis.
Radical Party of the Left or PRG, Sylvia Pinel.
Citizen and Republican Movement or MRC, Jean-Luc Laurent.
Martinican Progressive Party or PPM, Aim Césaire.
National Front or FN, Marine Le Pen.
La France Insoumise or FI, Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
Europe Ecologists, the Greens or ILV, David Cormand.
French Communist Party or PCF, Pierre Laurent.
Débat La France or DLF, Nicolas Dupont-Aignan.
International Organization Participation.
ADB, non-regional member, FDB, non-regional member, Arctic Council, Observer, Australia Group, DEEC, BIS, BSEC, Observer, CBSS, Observer, CERN, EAPC, EBRD, ECB, IB, ITI, Implementing Country, EMU, SR, EU, FAO, FATF, FZ, G5, G7, G8, G10, G20, EADP, ERE, IBRD, ICAO, ICC, National Committees, ICT, ICRM, IDA, EA, IFAT, IFC, IFX, IGARD, Partners, IO, ILO, IMF, IMO, IMSO, INOC, Interpol, IOC, IAM, IPU, ISO, ITSO, ITU, ITUC, NGOs, MEGA, MINUSO, MINUSMA, MINUSTA, MONUSCO, NATO, NIA, NSG, OAS, Observer, ECT, OIF, OPCW, OS, Pacific Alliance, Observer, Paris Club, PCA, PIF, Partner, Shenzhen Convention, SELEC, Observer, SPC, UN, UNCTAD, UNESCO, UNIDO, UNIFIL, Union Latina, UNMIL, UNASI, UNWA, UN Security Council, Permanent, UNTSO, UNTO, UPU, WCO, WFTU, NGOs, WHO, WIPO, WMO, WTO, ZC.
Diplomatic representation in the U.S.
Ambassador Philippe Shine, since the 8th of July 2019.
Chancery.
4101 Reservoir Road Northwest, Washington, D.C. 20007.
Telephone.
12029446000.
Fax.
12029446166.
Consulate. S. General.
Atlanta, Boston, Chicago, Houston, Los Angeles, Miami, New Orleans, New York, San Francisco, Washington, D.C.
Diplomatic representation from the U.S.
Chief of Mission.
Ambassador Jamie D. McCourt, since the 18th of December 2017. Note: also accredited to Monaco.
Telephone.
33 1 43, the 22nd of December 22.
Embassy.
2 Avenue Gabriel, 75,008 Paris.
Mailing address.
SQ 116, APOA 09777.
Fax.
33. 1. 4266 97 83.
Consulates General.
Marseille, Strasbourg.
Consulates.
Bordeaux, Lyon, Rennes.
Flag description.
3 equal vertical bands of blue, hoist side, white, and red, known as the Le Drapeau Tricolore, French tricolor. The origin of the flag dates to 1790 and the French Revolution, when the ancient French color of white was combined with the blue and red colors of the Parisian militia, the official flag for all French dependent areas.
Note:
the design and or colors are similar to a number of other flags, including those of Belgium, Chad, Côte d'Ivoire, Ireland, Italy, Luxembourg, and Netherlands.
National symbols. A national symbol is a formal, floral, or other abstract representation, or some distinctive object, that over time has come to be closely identified with a country or entity. Not all countries have national symbols. A few countries have more than one. National symbols field listing.
Gallet rooster, fleur-de-lis, Marianne, female personification. National colors:
blue, white, red.
National anthem: a generally patriotic musical composition, usually in the form of a song or hymn of praise that evokes and eulogizes the history, traditions, or struggles of a nation or its people. National anthems can be officially recognized as a national song by a country's constitution or by an enacted law, or simply by tradition. Although most anthems contain lyrics, some do not. National anthem field listing.
Name:
La Marseillaise, the Song of Marseille.
Lyrics, music:
Claude Joseph Ralph Delisle.
Note:
adopted 1795, restored 1870, originally known as Chant de guerre pour l'armée du Rhin, war song for the Army of the Rhine. The National Guard of Marseille made the song famous by singing it while marching into Paris in 1792 during the French Revolutionary Wars.
Economy.
France.
Economy. Overview.
The French economy is diversified across all sectors. The government has partially or fully privatized many large companies, including Air France, France Telecom, Renault, and Fils. However, the government maintains a strong presence in some sectors, particularly power, public transport, and defense industries. France is the most visited country in the world with 89 million foreign tourists in 2017. France's leaders remain committed to a capitalism in which they maintain social equity by means of laws, tax policies, and social spending that mitigate economic inequality.
France's real GDP grew by 1.9% in 2017, up from 1.2% the year before. The unemployment rate, including overseas territories, increased from 7.8% in 2008 to 10.2% in 2015, before falling to 9.0% in 2017. Youth unemployment in metropolitan France decreased from 24.6% in the fourth quarter of 2014 to 20.6% in the fourth quarter of 2017.
France's public finances have historically been strained by high spending and low growth. In 2017, the budget deficit improved to 2.7% of GDP, bringing it in compliance with the mandated 3% deficit target. Meanwhile, France's public debt rose from 89.5% of GDP in 2012 to 97% in 2017.
Since entering office in May 2017, President Emmanuel Macron launched a series of economic reforms to improve competitiveness and boost economic growth. President Macron campaigned on reforming France's labor code and in late 2017 implemented a range of reforms to increase flexibility in the labor market by making it easier for firms to hire and fire and simplifying negotiations between employers and employees. In addition to labor reforms, President Macron's 2018 budget cuts public spending, taxes, and social security contributions to spur private investment and increase purchasing power. The government plans to gradually reduce corporate tax rate for businesses from 33.3% to 25% by 2022.
GDP, purchasing power parity,
$2.856 trillion.
$2.791 trillion.
$2.761 trillion.
Note:
Data are in 2017 dollars.
Country comparison to the world.
10.
GDP. Official exchange rate.
$2.588 trillion.
GDP. Real growth rate.
2.3%.
1.1%.
1%.
Country comparison to the world.
141.
GDP per capita. PPP.
$44,100.
$43,200.
$42,900.
Note:
Data are in 2017 dollars.
Country comparison to the world.
40.
Gross national saving: Gross national saving is derived by deducting final consumption expenditure, household plus government, from gross national disposable income, and consists of personal saving, plus business saving, the sum of the capital consumption allowance and retained business profits, plus government saving, the excess of tax revenues over expenditures, but excludes foreign saving, the excess of imports of goods and services over exports. The figures are presented as a percent of GDP. A negative. More gross national saving field listing.
22.9% of GDP.
21.9% of GDP.
22.3% of GDP.
Country comparison to the world.
77.
GDP composition by end use.
Household consumption.
54.1%.
Government consumption.
23.6%.
Investment in fixed capital.
22.5%.
Investment in inventories.
0.9%.
Exports of goods and services.
30.9%.
Imports of goods and services.
Minus 32%.
GDP composition by sector of origin.
Agriculture.
1.7%.
Industry.
19.5%.
Services.
78.8%.
Agriculture products.
Wheat, cereals, sugar beets, potatoes, wine grapes, beef, dairy products, fish.
Industries.
Machinery, chemicals, automobiles, metallurgy, aircraft, electronics, textiles, food processing, tourism.
Industrial production growth rate.
2%.
Country comparison to the world.
130.
Labor force.
30.68 million.
Country comparison to the world.
20.
Labor force by occupation.
Agriculture.
2.8%.
Industry.
20%.
Services.
77.2%.
Unemployment rate.
9.4%.
10.1%.
Note:
includes overseas territories.
Country comparison to the world.
136.
Population below poverty line: national estimates of the percentage of the population falling below the poverty line are based on surveys of subgroups, with the results weighted by the number of people in each group. Definitions of poverty vary considerably among nations. For example, rich nations generally employ more generous standards of poverty than poor nations. Population below poverty line field listing.
14.2%.
Household income or consumption by percentage share: data on household income or consumption come from household surveys, the results adjusted for household size. Nations use different standards and procedures in collecting and adjusting the data. Surveys based on income will normally show a more unequal distribution than surveys based on consumption. The quality of surveys is improving with time, yet caution is still necessary in making inter-country comparisons. Household income or consumption by percentage share field listing.
Lowest 10%.
3.6%.
Highest 10%.
25.4%.
Distribution of family income. Gini index. This index measures the degree of inequality in the distribution of family income in a country. The index is calculated from the Lorentz curve, in which cumulative family income is plotted against the number of families arranged from the poorest to the richest. The index is the ratio of A, the area between a country's Lorentz curve and the 45-degree helping line, to B, the entire triangular area under the 45-degree line. The more nearly equal a country's income distribution, the closer its More distribution of family income. Gini index field listing.
29.3.
29.2.
Country comparison to the world.
137.
Budget.
Revenues.
1.392 trillion.
Expenditures.
1.459 trillion.
Taxes and other revenues.
53.8% of GDP.
Country comparison to the world.
10.
Budget surplus, plus, or deficit, dash.
Minus 2.6% of GDP.
Country comparison to the world.
116.
Public debt.
96.8% of GDP.
96.6% of GDP.
Note.
Data cover general government debt and include debt instruments issued, or owned, by government entities other than the Treasury. The data include Treasury debt held by foreign entities, the data include debt issued by subnational entities, as well as intragovernmental debt. Intragovernmental debt consists of Treasury borrowings from surpluses in the social funds, such as for retirement, medical care, and unemployment. Debt instruments for the social funds are not sold at public auctions.
Country comparison to the world.
20.
Fiscal year.
Calendar year.
Inflation rate. Consumer prices.
1.2%.
0.3%.
Country comparison to the world.
64.
Central bank discount rate.
0%. The 31st of December 2016.
0.05%. The 31st of December 2015.
Note.
This is the European Central Bank's rate on the marginal lending facility, which offers overnight credit to banks in the euro area.
Country comparison to the world.
153.
Commercial bank prime lending rate.
1.29%.
1.6%.
Country comparison to the world.
193.
Stock of Naira money.
$1.465 trillion.
$1.139 trillion.
Note.
See entry for the European Union for money supply for the entire euro area. The European Central Bank, ECB, controls monetary policy for the 18 members of the Economic and Monetary Union, EMU. Individual members of the EMU do not control the quantity of money circulating within their own borders.
Country comparison to the world.
5.
Stock of broad money.
$1.465 trillion.
$1.139 trillion.
Country comparison to the world.
5.
Stock of domestic credit.
$4.334 trillion.
$3.646 trillion.
Country comparison to the world.
5.
Market value of publicly traded shares.
$1.591 trillion.
$2.088 trillion.
$2.086 trillion.
Country comparison to the world.
8.
Current account balance.
Minus $14.83 billion.
Minus $18.55 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
195.
Exports.
$549.9 billion.
$507 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
7.
Exports. Partners.
Germany 14.8%, Spain 7.7%, Italy 7.5%, US 7.2%, Belgium 7%, UK 6.7%.
Exports. Commodities.
Machinery and transportation equipment, aircraft, plastics, chemicals, pharmaceutical products, iron and steel, beverages.
Imports.
$601.7 billion.
$536.7 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
6.
Imports, commodities.
Machinery and equipment, vehicles, crude oil, aircraft, plastics, chemicals.
Imports, partners.
Germany 18.5%, Belgium 10.2%, Netherlands 8.3%, Italy 7.9%, Spain 7.1%, UK 5.3%, US 5.2%, China 5.1%.
Reserves of foreign exchange and gold.
$156.4 billion.
$138.2 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
15.
Debt external.
$5.36 trillion.
$5.25 trillion.
Country comparison to the world.
3.
Stock of direct foreign investment. At home,
$858.3 billion.
$807.4 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
12.
Stock of direct foreign investment abroad.
$1.429 trillion.
$1.259 trillion.
Country comparison to the world.
9.
Exchange rates.
Euros, EUR, per US dollar.
0.885,
0.903,
0.9214,
0.885.
0.7634.
Energy.
France.
Electricity access.
Electrification. Total population.
100%.
Electricity. Production.
529.1 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
9.
Electricity. Consumption.
450.8 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
10.
Electricity. Exports.
61.41 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
3.
Electricity. Imports.
19.9 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
10.
Electricity. Installed generating capacity.
130.8 million.
Country comparison to the world.
9.
Electricity. From fossil fuels.
17% of total installed capacity.
Country comparison to the world.
198.
Electricity. From nuclear fuels.
50% of total installed capacity.
Country comparison to the world.
1.
Electricity. From hydroelectric plants.
15% of total installed capacity.
Country comparison to the world.
102.
Electricity. From other renewable sources.
19% of total installed capacity.
Country comparison to the world.
42.
Crude oil. Production.
16,000 barrels/day.
Country comparison to the world.
71.
Crude oil. Exports.
0 barrels/day.
Country comparison to the world.
126.
Crude oil. Imports.
1.147 million/day.
Country comparison to the world.
9.
Crude oil. Proved reserves.
65.97 million.
Country comparison to the world.
75.
Refined petroleum products. Production.
1.311 million/day.
Country comparison to the world.
15.
Refined petroleum products. Consumption.
1.705 million/day.
Country comparison to the world.
13.
Refined petroleum products. Exports.
440,600 barrels/day.
Country comparison to the world.
19.
Refined petroleum products. Imports.
886,800 barrels/day.
Country comparison to the world.
8.
Natural gas. Production.
16.99 million qm.
Country comparison to the world.
90.
Natural gas. Consumption.
41.88 billion qm.
Country comparison to the world.
24.
Natural gas. Exports.
6.031 billion qm.
Country comparison to the world.
26.
Natural gas. Imports.
48.59 billion qm.
Country comparison to the world.
10.
Natural gas. Proved reserves.
8.41 billion qm.
Country comparison to the world.
81.
Carbon dioxide emissions from consumption of energy.
341.2 million.
Country comparison to the world.
22.
Communications.
France.
Telephones, fixed lines.
Total subscriptions.
38.687 million.
Subscriptions per 100 inhabitants.
58.
Country comparison to the world.
6.
Telephones. Mobile cellular.
Total subscriptions.
69.017 million.
Subscriptions per 100 inhabitants.
103.
Country comparison to the world.
22.
Telephone system.
General assessment.
Extensive cable and microwave radio relay. Extensive use of fiber optic cable. Domestic satellite system. Highly developed, third largest in Europe. Broadband subscriber rate remains strong at 4%.
Domestic.
58 per 100 persons for fixed line and 103 per 100 for mobile cellular subscriptions.
International.
Country code 33, landing points for Circe South, TAT 14, Ingrid, Flag Atlantic 1, Apollo, Hugo, IFC 1, Ace, Seamewe 3 and 4, Dunnant, Africa 1, A1, Atlas Offshore, Hawk, IMU and Cable, Peace Cable, and North/TGN Eurasia/Seacom/Alexandros/Medex submarine cables providing links throughout Europe, Asia, Australia, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Africa and US, satellite Earth stations, more than 2 Intelsats, with total of 5 antennas, 2 for Indian Ocean and 3 for Atlantic Ocean, Eutelsat, 1 in Inmarsat, Atlantic Ocean region, HF radio telephone communications with more than 20 countries, 2019.
Overseas departments.
Country codes.
French Guiana -594, landing points for Ella Link, Carnawa, Americas the second to South America, Europe, Caribbean and US. Guadeloupe -590, landing points for GCN, Southern Caribbean Fiber, and ECFS around the Caribbean and US. Martinique -596, landing points for Amicas II, ECFS, and Southern Caribbean Fiber to South America, US and around the Caribbean. Mayotte -262, landing points for Fly Lion 3 and Lion 2 to East Africa and East African Islands and Indian Ocean. Reunion -262, landing points for Safe, Metis, and Lion submarine cables to Asia, South and East Africa, Southeast Asia and nearby Indian Ocean island countries of Mauritius and Madagascar, 2019.
Broadcast media.
A mix of both publicly operated and privately owned TV stations. State-owned France television stations operate 4 networks, one of which is a network of regional stations, and has part interest in several thematic cable/satellite channels and international channels. A large number of privately owned regional and local TV stations. Multi-channel satellite and cable services provide a large number of channels. Public broadcaster Radio France operates 7 national networks, a series of regional networks, and operates services for overseas territories and foreign audiences. Radio France Internationale, under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, is a leading international broadcaster. A large number of commercial FM stations, with many of them consolidating into commercial networks.
Internet country code.
Metropolitan France. French Guiana. Guadeloupe. Martinique. Mayotte. Reunion.
Internet users.
Total
57,226,585.
% of population
85.6%.
Country comparison to the world
11.
Broadband fixed subscriptions
Total
28.429 million.
Subscriptions per 100 inhabitants
42.
Country comparison to the world
7.
Military and security.
France.
Military expenditures
1.82% of GDP.
1.79% of GDP.
1.79% of GDP.
1.79% of GDP.
1.82% of GDP.
Country comparison to the world.
60.
Military and security forces.
Army. Armée de terre. Includes Foreign Legion, Navy, Marine Nationale, Air Force, Armée de l'air, Adler. Includes Air Defense, National Guard, Reserves, National Gendarmerie, Paramilitary Police Force that is a branch of the armed forces but under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of the Interior, also has additional duties to the Ministry of Defense, 2019.
Military service age and obligation.
18 to 25 years of age for male and female voluntary military service. No conscription. 1 year service obligation. Women serve in non-combat posts.
Military. Note.
The National Gendarmerie is subordinate to the Ministry of Defense, but serves under the Ministry of the Interior.
Transportation.
France.
National Air Transport System.
Number of registered air carriers.
30.
Inventory of registered aircraft operated by air carriers.
485.
Annual passenger traffic on registered air carriers.
65,039,503.
Annual freight traffic on registered air carriers.
4,098,310,000 Mount km.
Civil aircraft registration country code prefix.
F.
Airports.
464.
Country comparison to the world.
17.
Airports with paved runways.
Total.
294.
Over 3,047 meters.
14.
2,438 to 3,047 meters.
25.
1,524 to 2,437 meters.
97.
914 to 1,523 meters.
83.
Under 914 meters.
75.
Airports, with unpaved runways.
Total.
170.
1,524 to 2,437 m.
1.
914 to 1,523 m.
64.
Under 914 m.
105.
Heliports.
1.
Pipelines.
15,322 kilometers gas, 2,939 kilometers oil, 5,084 kilometers refined products.
Railways.
Total.
29,640 kilometers.
Standard gauge.
29,473 kilometers 1.435 m gauge. 15,561 kilometers electrified.
Narrow gauge.
167 kilometers 1.000 m gauge. 63 kilometers electrified.
Country comparison to the world.
10.
Roadways.
Total.
1,053,215 kilometers.
Urban.
654,201 kilometers.
Non-urban.
399,014 kilometers.
Country comparison to the world.
7.
Waterways.
Metropolitan France.
8,501 kilometers. 1,621 kilometers navigable by craft up to 3,000 metric tons.
Merchant marine.
Total.
555.
By type.
Container ship 24, general cargo 73, oil tanker 29, other 429.
Note.
Includes Monaco.
Country comparison to the world.
39.
Ports and terminals.
Major seaports.
Brest, Calais, Dunkirk, Le Havre, Marseille, Nantes.
Container port. Tes.
Le Havre. 2,870,000.
LNG terminals. Import.
Foscavoux, Fos-Tonkin, Montoir-de-Bretagne.
River ports.
Paris, Rouen, Seine.
Cruise. Ferry ports.
Calais, Cherbourg, Le Havre.
Strasbourg, Rhine, Bordeaux, Garonne.
Transportation. Note.
Begun in 1988 and completed in 1994, the Channel Tunnel, nicknamed the Channel, is a 50.5 kilometer, 31.4 mile, rail tunnel beneath the English Channel at the Strait of Dover that runs from Folkestone, Kent, England to Coquelles, Pas-de-Calais in northern France. It is the only fixed link between the island of Great Britain and mainland Europe.
Terrorism.
France.
Terrorist groups. Foreign-based.
Basque Fatherland and Liberty, ETA.
Aim. S.
Establish an independent Basque homeland based on Marxist principles in what is now southwestern France and northern Spain.
Area. S. Of operation.
Maintains a presence in the southwest.
Note.
In May of 2018, ETA announced that it was disbanding.
Transnational issues.
France.
Disputes. International.
Madagascar claims the French territories of Basse-Astille, India, Europa Island, Glorioso Islands, and Wandanovo Island. Comoros claims Mayotte. Mauritius claims Tromelin Island. Territorial dispute between Suriname and the French Overseas Department of French Guiana. France asserts a territorial claim in Antarctica, Adelie Land. France and Vanuatu claim Matthew and Hunter Islands, east of New Caledonia.
Refugees and internally displaced persons.
Refugees, country of origin.
23,918, Sri Lanka, 18,534, Afghanistan. 16,484, Democratic Republic of the Congo. 15,898, Russia. 15,822, Syria. 14,700, Sudan. 13,778, Serbia and Kosovo. 11,196, Turkey. 11,193, Cambodia. 9,264, Guinea. 8,131, Iraq. 7,821, Vietnam. 6,617, Laos. 5,419, Mauritania.
Stateless persons.
1,493,